Chapter 500. Mo Sure could only shake his head and sigh helplessly when he saw the map gradually turning red. The virus was so aggressive that even he couldn't stop it. The only thing he could do was to protect the first hunting island. Of course, other than getting 2 demon-suppressing orbs every day, he didn't idle around. Although he had a lot of evolution points, it consumed 30 million evolution points every day. If he didn't have any income, it wouldn't be long before he used up all his points. Therefore, he still had to hunt these general corpses every day to obtain kill points and evolution points. On a mountain more than 200 kilometers away from the Mystic Moon sect. The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect led the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to set up camp in this city. All the desolate hunters of the Mystic Moon sect had already left the flaming continent by flying ship. Originally, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect should also escape. However, she couldn't bear to see the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect die in the flaming continent. Therefore, she and an elder led these disciples to avoid the general corpses and escape to this mountain. The general corpses seemed to have some kind of reaction to humans. They would always go to places where humans gathered. Now that the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had gathered, they would naturally attract a large number of general corpses. That night, when the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were resting, they suddenly heard the roar of a general corpse at the foot of the mountain. They quickly prepared for battle. When they looked carefully, they found that there were about thousands of people running up the mountain. Behind them were tens of thousands of new zombies. They roared and chased after them. These people's combat power was very strong. As long as they turned around, they could take down a large number of new zombies. However, these zombies were almost immortal. The zombies that were taken down would quickly get up and continue to chase after them. These people could only run up the mountain. However, the path up the mountain had already been cut off by the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect. Therefore, at this time, the mountain was surrounded by cliffs. Those people ran to the edge of the cliff and saw that there was no way to go. They all cursed. Damn it! Why is the path cut off? Damn it! Some of them had flying skateboards. However, they were only a few. The others' flying skateboards were basically damaged during the long flight. At this moment, someone saw someone on the opposite mountain. Moreover, these people were all wearing the clothes of the Mystic Moon female sect. He could not help exclaiming aloud, "Senior sisters of the Mystic Moon female sect, we are disciples of the ancient dragon sect, please save us." The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect snorted when she received the report. The ancient dragon sect treated our Mystic Moon female sect well on the surface, but who knows how many obstacles they have set for us in the dark. They only had themselves to blame for their actions today. Ignore it. As a result, the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect could only watch as the ancient dragon sect disciples were surrounded by the new zombies. Although they had been fighting and struggling for more than 20 minutes, they had all died on the opposite cliff in the end. When the new zombies saw the Mystic Moon female sect disciples, their eyes turned red and they kept roaring at them. There were even new types of zombies trying to jump over the cliff. But in the end, because the distance was too far, they fell into the bottomless abyss after jumping halfway. However, the intelligence of these new zombies wasn't bad. Half an hour later, they thought of a solution. They came to the bottom of the cliff and began to climb up. Although the cliff was almost perpendicular to the ground. But for the hunters, it was not particularly difficult to climb. Similarly, it was not a problem for the new zombies with outstanding jumping ability. On the cliff, the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw this scene and quickly reported it to the sect leader. "Sect leader, what should we do?" The sect leader narrowed her eyes and slowly opened them. She was only putting up a final struggle with these 200,000 disciples. The virus was very aggressive. Even if she was here, it would only delay them for a few days. She had thought of bringing these disciples to the Ancient Flame sect. She heard that the sect leader of the Ancient Flame sect had come out of seclusion and could kill zombies. But this place was too far away from the Ancient Flame sect. How much danger would they have to go through? If they really went to the Ancient Flame sect, there would only be a few disciples left. But even if it was futile, she could not bear to not save them. But now, they were at the end of their rope. Many of the flying skateboards were damaged. One had to know that these disciples had lost their flying devices and could not fly at all. She originally thought that by leaving the crowd and bringing these disciples to this mountain, they would be able to last for a while. But she did not expect the ancient dragon sect to attract zombies again. What should she do next? She sat there cross-legged and seemed to be calm. But she was already a little anxious. Because she could not think of any solution at the moment. She could kill her way out, but there were too many disciples. It was impossible for all of them to escape. Especially the zombies at the foot of the mountain. There were many of them. And the zombies could not be killed at all. So it seemed that she could not bring these disciples to break out of the encirclement. The surrounding disciples looked at the sect leader at this moment. They were all waiting for the sect leader to answer. But the elder next to her knew that tonight was going to be a difficult night. At this moment, another disciple came to report. Sect leader, these new zombies are already halfway up. The sect master sighed slightly. Only then did he manage to pull himself together and said, "Prepare for battle. We will kill our way out." Yes. The disciples yelled at the top of their lungs. They seemed to be full of vigor. But only they knew that tonight was really going to be over. Along the way, the sect leader had helped them solve too many difficulties. But tonight, even the sect leader would not be able to bring them out of danger. At this moment, a few disciples looked at each other. Suddenly, they knelt in front of the sect leader. "Sect leader, please forgive me for offending you. We will not accept the battle." Hearing that, the sect leader looked at that disciple. "Why not?" Those disciples looked at each other. One of them said, "Sect leader, we can't escape tonight. But you and the third elder have the ability and strength to leave. Please leave with the third elder first." When the other female disciples heard that, they came to their senses and knelt down together. "Sect leader, please leave with the third elder." "Sect leader, please leave with the third elder." Hearing that, the sect leader slowly stood up. She said, "As the sect leader, if the Mystic Moon sect wants to be destroyed, I should die first." When the female disciples heard that, they all choked with sobs. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky not far away from them without any warning. Chapter 501. Just as the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were in a desperate situation. In the dark night sky, a figure suddenly appeared without any warning. Although it was night time, these Mystic Moon female sect disciples were not ordinary people. They were completely capable of seeing in the dark, but the things they saw were slightly darker than usual. When they saw Mo Shi, they were stunned. This was because they felt that this face was slightly familiar. Have they seen him before? They seemed to have. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it. Soon, a disciple remembered. He is Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo. It really is Island Master Mo. What is he doing here? They did not think that Island Master Mo was here to save them. Firstly, Island Master Mo was not related to them and had no obligation to ask them for help. Secondly, from past reviews, even though Island Master Mo wasn't an extremely evil person, he definitely wasn't a good person either. Naturally, he would not take such a huge risk to save them in the middle of the night. When the Mystic Moon female sect leader saw Mo Shi, it was as though she saw the last trace of hope. She hurriedly stood up and clasped her fists towards Mo Shi and said, "Island Master Mo, the Mystic Moon female sect has met with a great calamity. Please save us. If Island Master Mo needs us in the future, the Mystic Moon female sect will not refuse." Mo Shi did not say anything and only nodded. He had a good impression of this Mystic Moon female sect leader. Moreover, he originally came here to collect evolution points and slaughter points. With so many general corpses here, it was the best opportunity to collect evolution points and slaughter points. At this moment, his body slowly descended towards the bottom of the cliff. On the cliff, the general corpses that were climbing up saw this human in front of them and all let out excited roars. They continuously jumped towards Mo Shi and tried to push Mo Shi down. However, with a single thought from Mo Shi, these general corpses were unable to get close to him and all fell from the sky. On the cliff, when the Mystic Moon female sect disciples saw the zombies pouncing towards Mo Shi, their hearts tightened. Even though they knew that with Island Master Mo's strength, it would be very difficult for these new zombies to harm him. However, seeing that Mo Shi didn't use any energy to separate the zombies, they were naturally nervous. However, when they saw that none of the zombies were able to get close to Mo Shi, they came to a realization. Psychic Master. He must be a Psyche Master. No wonder Island Master Mo is so powerful. He is actually a Psyche master. However, their sect master quickly noticed that something was amiss. She slowly shook her head, and her tone was somewhat surprised. No, he's not a psychic master, but a spiritual psychic master. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were stunned when they heard this. Immediately, he exclaimed in surprise, "Spiritual psychic." They had seen spiritual psyche masters before. Mystic Moon female sect once had 5 spiritual psyche masters. In order to reach the level of a spiritual reader, one would need to spend a lot of energy and time, far more than an ordinary spiritual master or desolate hunter. Therefore, as long as one was a spiritual reader, it was impossible for them to cultivate anything else. However, according to what they knew, this Island Master Mo was originally an extremely powerful Grand Desolate Master. Summoner again. Now, he was also a spiritual reader. Is there anything you don't know? However, some disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect started to worry. But why is he going down? There are thousands of new types of zombies below. Is he confident if he goes down? The Mystic Moon female sect master, Xianxia, shook her head slightly. How can the likes of you guess the thoughts of a character like Island Master Mo? Those disciples quickly lowered their heads and kept quiet, not daring to say another word. At this moment, Mo Shi was slowly descending from the sky. When he was 100 meters away from the ground, the general zombies on the ground had already stretched their necks hungrily. They were even drooling from the corners of their mouths. When he descended a little further, these general zombies suddenly jumped into the air like a group of fleas that were suddenly hung out to dry. However, once they got close to Mo Shi only needed to move his dragon psyche slightly. These general zombies fell down one after another. Soon, Mo Shi landed in the air, only 50 meters above the ground. At this moment, more general zombies pounced on Mo Shi. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the ground was filled with black general zombies. No matter who it was, if they were in such a situation, they would only feel despair. Above the cliff, Xianxia stared at Mo Shi. She was not worried for Mo Shi, but wanted to see how the continent's strongest person was like. At this moment, a saber appeared in Mo Shi's right hand. This saber looked very ordinary. It had a black body and the handle was wrapped with a black coarse cloth. It looked like a large butcher's knife. Then, a fiery red energy poured into the butcher's knife from Mo Shi's right arm. After a short while, more than half of the energy in his body had been poured into the dragon-slaying saber. The originally ordinary dragon salyer, at this moment, was actually shining brightly. In the next moment, Mo Shi swept the dragon-slaying saber with his right hand. Then, with a thought, he kept the dragon-slaying saber in his system backpack. Above the cliff, the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were all puzzled when they saw this scene. What is Island Master Mo doing? Why did Island Master Mo put the saber away? It's very strange. Xianxia was also slightly surprised when she saw this scene. What she saw was exactly the same as what the female disciples saw. She had no idea what Mo Shi was doing. The only difference between her and the other female disciples was that she could faintly feel that Mo Shi's saber strike wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Just as the female disciples were puzzled. In the next moment, the black mass of general corpses below the cliff suddenly disappeared without a sign. It was so clean that not a single gap was left. Everyone was extremely surprised. Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that Island Master Mo's attack just now? Thinking of this, all the female disciples were inexplicably surprised. In their eyes, Island Master Mo had just casually swung the saber. After that, he put the saber away. He did not even use any energy. The thousands of new zombies disappeared just like that? Just as they were surprised, the ground suddenly trembled. Oh no, an earthquake! Someone cried out. But at this moment, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect shook her head and said, "No, it's Island Master Mo." Before she finished speaking, the shaking under her feet became even more intense. In the next moment, rumble. The entire mountain began to collapse. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The entire mountain with a radius of hundreds of kilometers collapsed with a loud bang. It was like the end of the world. At this moment, all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect had the same thought that shocked them to the extreme. It was Island Master Mo who had cut off this mountain with a single slash. Chapter 502. The mountain was more than 100 kilometers long from east to west and 30 kilometers wide from north to south. But it was cut in half by Wang Yi. What kind of terrifying destructive power was that? Most importantly, they did not see the energy of that slash. His movements were like that of an ordinary person, casually swinging a knife. And it caused such terrifying destruction. What kind of strength was that? Although many of the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had lost their flying skateboards, they could not fly in the air. But they could still slowly float down from the sky. In the smoke and dust from the collapse of the mountain, they slowly floated down to the ground. After a full 15 minutes, only the smoke and dust could be seen. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect slowly landed among the large and small stones on the ground. Xianxia immediately floated down to Mo Shi and clasped her fists to Mo Shi. She said, "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Mo. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have survived today." Mo Shi used his dragon will to investigate. There were many disciples of the Mystic Moon sect within the range of his dragon will. He shook his head slightly and said, "You won't be able to go far with them." Xianxia smiled bitterly and said, "I know, but I really can't bear to leave them behind." Mo Shi pondered for a while and said, "Although my hunting island number 1 is not absolutely safe, it should not be an issue at all to fend off those general corpses." Xianxia was overjoyed when she heard this. She hurriedly bowed to Mo Shi. "Island Master Mo, I thank you for your kindness on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of disciples behind me." Mo Shi shook his head slightly and said, "No need to say more. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I'll give you half an hour to rest. After half an hour, follow me to the first hunting island." In fact, Mo Shi had his own considerations when he was willing to take in the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect. There were only about 50,000 people on the first hunting island. Compared to the huge flaming land, it was still a small force. He could not always guard the first hunting island. Moreover, if the corpse virus wasn't dealt with properly, the entire flaming origin continent might be infected. At that time, the first hunting island would have to face the trillions of general corpses of the flaming dawn continent. Then how could he endure it? The hundreds of thousands of disciples from the Mystic Moon female sect would make up for the lack of manpower on hunting island number 1. 90% of the people who had followed Mo Shi to the flaming dawn continent were men. Women had become a rare species on hunting island 1. They were willing to trust Mo Shi and follow Mo Shi to hunting island 1. Now that there was an opportunity for them to find wives, Mo Shi naturally wouldn't let it go. Thus, in the next few days, Mo Shi led the hundreds of thousands of female disciples and began to migrate. 5 days later, they returned to hunting island 1. The disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw that hunting island number 1 was surrounded by blood-red infected creatures. However, the center was full of vitality. They were all very surprised. The people on hunting island number 1 were overjoyed at the arrival of the Mystic Moon female sect disciples. "It's too beautiful. Look at that one, I like that one. They're like fairies descending from the heavens." "Are you kidding? They're the Mystic Moon female sect, the 3rd largest sect on the Flaming Dawn continent. Mr. Mo is really amazing. He even brought all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to hunting island 1. Let's not talk about other things. In short, we bachelors have a way to survive now. Thank you, Mr. Mo." Due to the sudden arrival of hundreds of thousands of people, hunting island 1 was not big enough. Mo Shi asked Guajutao to start expanding the living area on hunting island 1. The female disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect also came to help. Although they were all women, they were not inferior to men when it came to work. This was probably because the Mystic Moon female sect was made up of only female disciples. All the work had to be done by these women, which was why they were able to train so well. Just as the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect were settled in, Mo Shi received a system notification in his mind. The number of people in the Dragon Palace has exceeded 100,000. It can be upgraded by 1 level. Do you want to upgrade now? Mo Shi was quite surprised. He had been hesitating whether to use the evolution points in his hand to upgrade the Dragon Palace. However, he had to use his current evolution points to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. This was the only way he could think of to break the siege of the general corpse. Therefore, he did not upgrade the Dragon Palace. He did not expect that the Dragon Palace could be upgraded after bringing back so many disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect. What was there to hesitate about? Upgrade. Mo sure said. The system's voice immediately sounded. This upgrade does not require evolution points, but it will take 72 hours. Therefore, Mo sure did not leave Hunting Island 1 for the next 72 hours. In this world, it was possible to encounter infected general corpses everywhere. Therefore, it was better to be careful. 3 days later, just as Mo sure and Mo sure had lunch, the system notification sounded in his mind. Dragon Palace successfully upgraded. Mo sure quickly checked the Dragon Palace's attributes. Name, Dragon Palace. Level, 5. Members, 231,103. Defense level. Able to resist attacks below level 10 Desolate Master, including level 10 Desolate Master. Refining platforms. 10. Other attributes. Click to expand. Mo sure clicked to expand the other attributes and found that there were not many changes to them. Only the addition of 1,000 virtual sentry towers. Mo sure could place these 1,000 virtual sentry towers within a 10,000-kilometer radius around the Dragon Palace. This way, Mo sure would be able to see any changes within a 10,000-kilometer radius. The biggest change was the defense level and refining platforms that were displayed on the surface. The defense level was maxed out. In other words, even the strongest existence in the Flaming Origin continent would not be able to break through the defense of Hunting Island 1. Even the current Mo sure would not be able to break through it. The defense level was not weak at all. Another change was that the number of refining platforms had increased to 10. 10 desolate refining platforms meant that 10 desolate masters could be refined. In 3 months, he would be able to produce 100 grand desolate masters. It was exciting just thinking about it. When the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw how easy it was to create desolate masters on Hunting Island 1, they felt that their worldview was shattered. From what they knew, every grand desolate master had lived for hundreds of years. First they had to have absolute talent. Then they had to train hard and take risks to gain experience in various places. They also needed the support of absolute luck before they could become a grand desolate master. However, this number 1 hunting island had produced 10 grand desolate masters in 10 days. This was too much of a bug. Xianxia originally thought that she would take these female disciples to other planets when she had the chance in the future. But when she saw this bug-like refining platform, she finally gave up on this idea. Chapter 503. Xianxia thought, let these female disciples stay here. Perhaps in the near future, many of them would have a chance to become grand desolate masters. As their sect leader, she was happy for them. Therefore, she did not plan to leave immediately. Instead, she contacted the elders in the sect and asked them to bring the desolate hunters to other planets to develop. If there was a chance in the future, she would ask the elders to bring the disciples back. Thinking of the desolate hunter disciples, before they left, they were the elites of the sect. But by the time they returned, many of the desolate hunter disciples in the sect might have become grand desolate masters. I don't know how they should feel. In the following days, Mo sure went out every day to kill the general corpses. His evolution points and kill points were also increasing rapidly. Finally, one day. In his mind, the system's familiar voice sounded frowny face kill points have reached 10 billion. Can be upgraded. Mo sure said in his mind without hesitation. Upgrade. This upgrade will take 48 hours. Mo sure immediately returned to the first hunting island. He stayed on the first hunting island for 2 days. The system's voice sounded again frowny face upgrade successful. At the same time, Mo sure's attributes appeared in his mind frowny face name. Mo sure. Level. Level 10 Desolate Hunter. Level 10 Long Nian Sure. Mo sure saw it and could not help but feel excited. One more level and he would become a grand desolate master. There were so many general corpses on the continent. If he kept killing them, he would be able to get enough kill points. According to his previous experience, another upgrade would require 100 billion kill points. Killing 10 general corpses would give him 1 kill point. Then he would have to kill 1 trillion general corpses. There were only 3 trillion humans in the entire Flaming Land. If he really wanted to get so many kill points, it would mean that at least 1/3 of the Flaming Land's population had become general corpses. Mo sure shook his head. This would not do. He asked in his mind, "System, is there no other way to upgrade?" If it was in the past, the system would basically remain silent when faced with such a problem, because the system would usually give the best solution. No other choice would be better than the system's solution. But this time, Mo sure had not expected it. When he asked this question, the system replied instantly, frowny face, "There are still 3 options." Mo sure was slightly taken aback. Then he hurriedly said, "Tell me quickly." The system's voice sounded, frowny face 1. Use all of your current evolution points to upgrade Dragon Palace by 1 level. He could increase the number of refining stations to 100. Each desolate refining platform required 10 days to refine a Grand Desolate Master. As long as the host spends 10 days to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters, the host will automatically level up. From there, you will be promoted to a Grand Desolate Master. Mo Sher's eyes lit up. That was a good idea. However, he quickly rejected this plan. All of his current evolution points still need to be used to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. Currently, the demon-suppressing orb was the only thing that could be used by others to deal with corpse generals. What about the second one? Mo Sher asked. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face 2. With the current speed of the desolate refining platform, it will be able to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters in 3 months. At that time, the host will automatically level up. Mo Sher nodded his head. Yes, this is okay. In other words, even if Mo Sher didn't do anything in these 3 months, after 3 months he would also level up. At that time, he would directly become a Grand Desolate Master. Other Grand Desolate Masters had to go through untold hardships and hundreds of years to reach the Grand Desolate Master realm. Even if he didn't do anything and just ate, drank, played and slept, he would still reach the Grand Desolate Master realm in 3 months. If other Grand Desolate Masters knew about this, they would vomit blood. Of course, compared to the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform, Mo Sher's speed was a lot slower. However, the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform only had the fighting strength of normal Grand Desolate Masters. Although Mo Sher was only a level 10 Desolate Master, his fighting strength was extremely powerful. He could already challenge level 5 to 6 Grand Desolate Masters. This didn't include the Sea Dragon clones bonus. Thus, he didn't envy them. What about the third one? Mo Sher asked. The system replied, frowny face 3. Kill a living giant dragon and devour its blood. You can advance to the Grand Desolate Master realm, which is the Giant Dragon realm. When Mo Sher heard this, he was a little speechless. Are there other giant dragons in this world? The system replied, frowny face, the universe is big. There are all kinds of strange things. Mo Sher's eyes lit up and he asked, so, there are really places in the universe where giant dragons live? This time, the system didn't reply instantly. It directly fell into silence. However, Mo Sher had already tasted something from the system's words. The system definitely wasn't randomly giving out such a mission. In that case, it shouldn't take too long for him to see a real giant dragon. The second giant dragon other than himself. Of course, it could also be many giant dragons. And from the looks of it, the system seemed to be deliberately pushing him to the opposite side of the giant dragons. The rope given was called the Dragon Binding Rope, and the saber given was called the Dragon Slaying Saber. Even the evolution had evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. If the other giant dragons knew about it, they might try every means to hunt him down. Thinking of this, Mo Sher seemed to have seen what kind of battle he would face in the near future. Thinking of this, he felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Just reaching the peak of the flaming beginning continent was far from enough. He had to increase his combat strength to a higher level before he met those giant dragons. Therefore, in the next few days, Mo Sher didn't wait quietly for more than 3 months to pass. Instead, he kept going outside and slaughtering those general corpses. And now, his methods were even more ruthless and he slaughtered faster. His evolution points were also constantly rising. Gradually, time passed. In more than 3 months, Mo Sher's kill points had reached more than 1 billion. Obviously, he was still far from reaching 100 billion. However, in these 3 months, he had signed in more than 200 demon-suppressing orbs. With so many demon-suppressing orbs, he felt a little more relaxed. At the same time, on this day, The 100th Grand Desolate Master was refined on the Desolate Refining Platform. In Mo Shi's mind, a system notification suddenly sounded frowny face after refining 100 Grand Desolate Masters. The host will automatically level up by 1 level. In the next moment, Mo Shi felt a huge amount of energy suddenly surging through his meridians without any warning. Every cell in his body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Every muscle in his body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Every vein in his body seemed to be about to burst. However, this feeling only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Then, his entire body suddenly felt relaxed. Chapter 504. Compared to other level 10 Desolate Hunters who needed decades to become a Grand Desolate Master, Wang Yi's process was much simpler. The process of his cells coming to life, his muscles tearing, and his meridians bursting only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Soon, he felt his body relax. It was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. In his mind, the system's voice also sounded, "Promotion successful." Mo Shi checked his status. Name, Mo Shi level. Level 1 Grand Desolate Master, Rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon, Level 10 Long Yen Shi ability. Click to expand. Phew, Mo Shi let out a long breath. He had finally become a Grand Desolate Master. At the same time, according to the Giant Dragon's power system, he had reached Rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. The dragon race's ranks were Giant Dragon, Evolved Giant Dragon, Super Evolved Giant Dragon, Ancient Giant Dragon, Immemorial Giant Dragon, and so on. Mo Shi's current level of Evolved Giant Dragon could only be considered as a newbie. Mo Shi was already an invincible existence in the Flaming Land. This promotion had raised his strength to another level. Of course, this was still not enough. Since the system wanted to train him to become a Dragon Slayer, he had to continue to increase his strength. Now that he had become a Grand Desolate Master, he needed 1 trillion kill points for every level up. Even if all the people in the Flaming Land turned into general corpses and he killed them all, it would not be enough for him to level up. Thus, there were only 2 methods left. One was to use all his evolution points to level up the Dragon Palace and double the number of refining tables. However, this was not a consideration for now. The last method was to slay a dragon. According to the system, as long as he killed a giant dragon, he could level up to a Grand Desolate Master. Now that he was a Grand Desolate Master, he would need to kill at least 10 giant dragons. In the Flaming Land, there was not a single giant dragon other than himself. Where would he find 10 giant dragons? The system's voice quickly sounded. You only need to kill 1 giant dragon to level up. Mo Shi was surprised. Oh? Why? The system replied, the host has not killed a real giant dragon, so killing a giant dragon will level up. Consider it a reward for the host. Mo Shi nodded. Yes, that's a good idea. But where can I find a dragon? The system fell into silence once again. Mo Shi shook his head. Once the system remained silent, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that he could only fumble around on his own. For the next 2 months, Hunting Island 1 was peaceful. Every 10 days, the number 1 Hunting Island would produce 10 Grand Desolate Masters. Outside of Hunting Island number 1, the entire continent was not peaceful. The Corpse General had already taken over more and more areas. Almost half of the humans on the Flaming Continent had been infected. In the early stages of the zombie infection, many people had the mentality that the fewer people there were, the safer it would be. Just like a zombie infection, once a zombie got into a densely populated city, the whole city would be in an uproar. If a zombie was thrown into a village with only 20 to 30 families, it was very likely that only the village would be infected. Little did they know that this was equivalent to being surrounded by the commander corpses and then being defeated one by one. By now, people had also realized this. They started huddling together for warmth. At the same time, some cultivators with special attributes such as fire and ice did not die after being infected. Instead, their abilities were greatly improved. After their strength increased, their abilities became the bane of the Corpse General virus. In theory, the Corpse General virus could not be killed. However, cultivators with ice attribute could use their ice attribute energy to freeze the virus. The frozen virus would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As for cultivators with fire attribute, as long as they could raise the temperature of their fire attribute energy to a certain degree, they could directly vaporize the virus. There were also cultivators with lightning attribute energy. Their lightning attribute energy was extremely explosive and destructive. They could vaporize the corpse general virus with just one blow. There were also cultivators with poison attribute energy. After their energy was strengthened, not only would they be immune to the corpse general virus, the poison attribute energy in their bodies would also have a strong suppressive effect on the corpse general virus. Therefore, when almost all the desolate hunters had fled, there were some heroes who specialized in hunting down the corpse general virus. Of course, such heroes were very few in number. Therefore, they had a very high status in the hearts of the people. In many cities, the people used these heroes as their leaders to set up defensive lines to defend against the corpse general virus. As a result, many bases of various sizes gradually formed on the flaming continent. When Mo saw these bases, he could not help but shake his head. It turned out that when he came to the flaming continent from Earth, he had jumped from a small fire pit into an even bigger one. Mo had used his draconic will to briefly scan a few bases. The bodies of the leaders of these bases had been strengthened by the corpse general virus. Their strength had reached the level of a grand desolate master. However, this was clearly far from enough. There were more and more corpse general virus outside the bases, and the resources in their bases were decreasing. If they wanted to survive, they had to go out frequently to search for resources. This was unavoidable. After more than 2 months, there were more than 1,500 bases on the flaming continent. With so many bases, there were naturally more than 1,500 grand desolate masters with special abilities. It was also at this time that the corpse general virus began to gather and launch a large-scale attack on the human bases. At first, the people were not prepared, and the corpse general virus easily broke through more than 100 bases. After that, the people began to strengthen their defenses and defend these bases. However, this was only the beginning, because the corpse general virus would only increase, and with these 1,400 experts, the corpse general virus could not kill as fast as the corpse general virus could infect them. Among so many experts, apart from Mo, the strongest was the sect master of the ancient flame sect, Lori. Mo had been killing corpse general virus far away from the bases, so no one knew how strong he was. As a result, Lori seemed to have become the strongest person on the continent. With the ancient flame sect as the base, the radius of the base was more than 100 kilometers. Within this range, the corpse general virus did not dare to show its head. If it did, it would be destroyed by Lori. Lori was in the limelight on the entire flaming continent. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall on East End Island. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall, there was a huge pool with a radius of 50 kilometers. The seawater from the surrounding waterfalls all gathered in this huge pool. No one knew where the seawater from the surrounding waterfalls went after gathering in this pool. The pool was dark and deep, like a huge black eye gazing at the sky from the bottom of the sea. On this day, at a certain moment, 5 meters above the pool, the air suddenly distorted. Chapter 505. Sea Heart Waterfall, 5 meters above the deep pool. The space suddenly distorted. Then, a huge figure suddenly appeared. This huge figure was about 1,000 meters long. It had a pair of wings on its back. Its long tail was also more than 3 meters long. Its body was covered in black scales. There were ferocious spikes on its head. It was a giant dragon. This giant dragon's wings flapped slightly. Its figure instantly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already 5,000 meters above the Sea Heart Waterfall. It lowered its head and looked down at the entire sea. Its pitch-black dragon eyes kept turning. Just a few seconds later, its wings flapped again. In the next moment, its figure had already disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already more than 1,000 kilometers away. Its wings flapped again. It reappeared more than 1,000 kilometers to the east. Just like that, it flapped its wings a few times and soon explored the area within 1,000 kilometers of the Sea Heart Waterfall. Finally, its figure stopped in the sky above East Pole Island. At the same time, a voice sounded in this giant dragon's right ear. "Kongjiu, have we arrived?" The dragon called Empty Nine chuckled and spoke in a human voice. "That's right. We're here." The voice sounded in its right ear again. "Let's see how the creatures there are. We've been away for tens of thousands of years. They must have grown and are not as weak as before." The giant dragon called Kongjiu smiled and said, "Then I'll test them." The voice in its right ear said, "Just test them. Don't kill them randomly. Every living thing here had a number. If you kill too many, it'll be troublesome if the higher-ups find out." Kong Jiu chuckled and said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." East Pole Island had already built a base called East Pole Base. The East Pole Island Lord did not escape from the flame-beginning continent with the others. Instead, he had been protecting the people on the island. No one would have thought that the East Pole Island Lord, who had always been extremely strict, would live and die with the islanders in this moment of life and death. However, he was unfortunately infected with the Corpse General virus in a battle with a General Corpse. However, not only did the Corpse General virus not turn him into a General Corpse, but it also greatly strengthened his body. As a result, his strength had soared to level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Moreover, his body had also evolved to a certain extent. The fire attribute energy in his body could vaporize the corpse virus in a short period of time. Since then, he had led the islanders to build the East Pole Base here. At this moment, the people in the East Pole Base were busy building the base. When someone inadvertently raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a huge figure slowly flapping its wings and floating in the sky. And this huge figure was exactly the same as the giant dragon recorded in legends, ancient murals, and ancient books. The man's eyes widened in shock. His mouth opened slightly. The person next to him noticed this person's strange behavior and followed his gaze. With one look, his eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly. After a while, his Adam's apple moved with difficulty. His lips moved. He wanted to make a sound. However, he realized that his throat was a little dry. His Adam's apple squirmed again with difficulty before he spoke. "I'm sorry." Giant dragon. When the others heard his voice, they all looked up at the sky. With one look, everyone was incomparably shocked. Giant dragon. It's really a giant dragon. This is a real giant dragon. Is it an illusion? It's impossible. Everyone is hallucinating. This is a real giant dragon. Amidst the shocked cries, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. In the culture of the Flaming Land, almost every race had a giant dragon as their totem. Giant dragons were the most powerful and mysterious creatures in the universe. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were many giant dragons on this continent. However, for some reason, all the giant dragons disappeared. Some said that a disaster fell from the sky and caused the giant dragons to go extinct. Some said that the giant dragons could not adapt to the changes in the environment. Some said that the giant dragons went to other planets. Regardless of which theory it was, not a single giant dragon had appeared in the Flaming Land for tens of thousands of years. And now, a living giant dragon had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? How could they not prostrate themselves in worship? The East Pole Island Lord heard the commotion and also came to the courtyard. When he saw the huge figure that was more than 1,000 meters long in the sky, his entire body seemed to tremble. Giant dragon. This was a real giant dragon. Even someone as powerful as him had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At this moment, the giant dragon that was slowly flapping its wings in the sky suddenly retracted its wings. It dove toward the ground. In almost 3 seconds, it dove to the ground from a height of more than 10,000 meters. A pair of front claws clawed toward the ground. Rumble! Its pair of huge claws drew a huge ravine that was more than 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide on the ground. The hundreds of humans in the ravine were instantly turned into hundreds of corpses under its sharp claws. They were thrown far away. Then, its giant tail, which was hundreds of meters long, swept across the area. Rumble! One after another, the buildings collapsed to the ground. Gotcha! One by one, the trees were snapped. Ah! The humans screamed in agony. But this time, hundreds of humans were directly sent to the Yellow Springs. The 200,000 humans who were prostrating on the ground were all dumbfounded. They had always been in awe of giant dragons. After this giant dragon appeared, they immediately prostrated themselves in worship. Why was the giant dragon doing this to them? In their panic, they fled in all directions. However, the speed at which they fled was far slower than the speed at which the giant dragon slaughtered them. Every time the giant dragon's tail swept across, at least 100 people would be smashed into meat paste. This scene was even more terrifying than any monster movie. When the East Pole Island Master saw this, He was also terrified at first. Like these humans, he did not know why the giant dragon would suddenly attack these humans. But soon, the fear in his heart was replaced by anger. These humans under his command worshipped the giant dragon so much. Even in their hearts, they did not dare to disobey the giant dragon in the slightest. Some even offered incense to the giant dragon and prayed to it every day. They never imagined that the giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere would treat them like this. In his anger, a fiery red spear condensed in his right hand. This fiery red spear seemed to be condensed from magma. Holding the spear in his right hand, he roared, "Evil dragon, die!" As he spoke, he threw the spear in his right hand at the giant dragon. Chapter 506. The magma spear in the East Pole Island Master's hand streaked across a distance of 5,000 meters. Due to the high temperature, the air where the spear streaked across seemed to have been distorted. In almost an instant, the magma spear hit Shilong's chest. Ding! When the magma spear hit the huge dragon's chest, it was unable to pierce through its scales. Instead, the magma spear broke into 3 pieces after a few cracking sounds. The East Pole Island Master's expression immediately turned extremely grave. One must know that he had already reached the level of a level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Furthermore, due to the strengthening of his body by the corpse general virus, his strength had far surpassed the previous level 8 Grand Desolate Master. According to his estimation, he should be about the same as the previous level 10 Grand Desolate Master. In the end, the magma spear he condensed did not even manage to break through the scales of this huge dragon. However, even so, he could not watch as the people in the base were wantonly massacred by this huge dragon. With a roar, he bent his legs. He stomped on the ground. The next moment, his body soared into the sky like a rocket. At the place where he was previously standing, a ring of fiery red energy spread out in all directions. When he reached an altitude of 10,000 meters, a pair of flaming wings condensed on his back. When the huge dragon saw this scene, it spoke in human language. Kaka, interesting. The energy in the East Pole Island Master's body began to surge out of his body. Soon, his entire body was covered in flames. Then he roared, "Evil dragon, die!" He pushed both his palms toward the evil dragon. As he pushed both his palms forward, all the flames on his body blasted toward the alternative dragon. It was as if a sea of flames had covered the sky and covered the earth. It actually enveloped the 1,000-meter-long evil dragon within it. It was very difficult to imagine how a human could release such a large sea of flames. This situation continued for 5 minutes. When the humans on the ground who were fleeing in panic saw this scene, they all heaved a sigh of relief. However, after 5 minutes, the sigh of relief that they had just heaved a sigh of relief became tense again. That was because the East Pole Island Master's high-intensity flames were slowly retracted, and the sea of flames in the sky gradually disappeared. Only then did they realize that the huge dragon was actually unscathed. It was still flapping its wings slightly as it floated there quietly. Its pair of abyss-like dragon eyes revealed a hint of blood-sucking. Then, a human voice came from his throat. However, this voice was hoarser than a human's. It sounded like someone was sawing wood. "It's my turn." As it spoke, the giant dragon opened its huge mouth. Boom! A burst of flames immediately shot toward the East Pole Island Master. Although this sea of flames was not as large as the one released by the East Pole Island Master earlier, it was still far more powerful. However, the East Pole Island Master was still able to sense that the flames contained an extremely dangerous sensation. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he covered his entire body with fiery red energy. In the next moment, he was engulfed by the flames. When the flames spewed out by the dragon disappeared, the East Pole Island Master had long been burned to a crisp. Falling from the sky. Bang! He landed on the grass. His body was still emitting thick smoke. Several of his subordinates hurried over. Under their probing, the East Pole Island Master no longer had any signs of life. "Island Master is dead," one of them exclaimed. "Island Master is dead. Island Master is dead." Many people nearby screamed out in horror. Since the outbreak of the zombie virus in the apocalypse, the East Pole Island Master had been protecting their safety. He led them to build a base and led them to repel the attacks of the zombie soldiers again and again. In their hearts, the Island Master was their hero. The Island Master was their savior. But now, The island master was actually killed by this evil dragon. The flames of anger in their hearts rose. However, in the face of such a huge mysterious creature, a totem that they had always worshipped, they could not summon the slightest thought of fighting back. In the sky, the evil dragon killed the East Pole Island master. It let out a guffaw of laughter. Keek. How dare a mere low-level creature make an enemy out of a giant dragon? Then, it opened its mouth again and spewed flames toward the ground. Boom! The fire began to burn on the East Pole Island. The more than 200,000 people on the East Pole Island were screaming and rolling in pain in the fire. The evil dragon in the sky let out a guffaw of laughter. It was like a child pouring boiling water into a colony of ants. In the end, the 200,000 people on the island were all burned to a crisp. No one was spared. Decades later, someone set foot on the island. The burned people could be seen everywhere. Some were curled up into balls. Some were rushing toward the sea. Some were carrying children. The situation was extremely horrifying. At this moment, the giant dragon disappeared in a flash after slaughtering the 200,000 people. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. It lowered its head and glanced at the billowing smoke on the East Pole Island below. It chuckled twice. Then, with a slight flap of its wings, it was thousands of kilometers away. In the next 3 days, 5 or 6 bases were destroyed by the giant dragon every day. Of these 5 or 6 bases that were destroyed, not a single person survived. For a time, the entire Flaming Dawn continent was in a state of panic. The corpse general virus was already enough for them. It was not easy for them to build a base under the leadership of various heroes. But now, a giant dragon had appeared out of nowhere and easily destroyed several bases. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than the zombie virus. If this continued, would it not be long before it could destroy all the bases on the continent? At the same time, these people could not understand. Why would a creature that they had always worshipped as totems be so cruel? On Hunting Island number 1, Mo Sher's heart skipped a beat when he saw this news. Could it be that the system had predicted that an evil dragon would suddenly break into the Flaming Dawn continent and wreak havoc when it asked him to slay the dragon? Since slaying a giant dragon could increase his level by 1 level. Of course, he had to give it a try. On this day, the giant dragon came to the sky above another base. The people in the base had long been on guard. They had already activated the energy light shield. This khaki-colored energy light shield was like a huge bowl that covered the base. They knew that the giant dragon's destructive power was great, so they had specially reinforced this light shield. And the degree of reinforcement was extremely abnormal. It could completely withstand the simultaneous attacks of more than 20 grand desolate masters. The giant dragon slowly flapped its wings and floated in the air. It was like an eagle overlooking its prey. At this moment, a voice sounded in its right ear. "Kongjiu, are you messing around again?" The giant dragon chuckled twice. "How am I messing around? I'm just here to do research. Don't you dare slander me." The voice came from the other side. "I'm AF** King Male Dragon. Why would I slander you? Don't force human words on me." Chapter 507. In the sky, the voice in the black dragon's right ear said, "Kongjiu, don't mess around. If you kill too many, the higher-ups will find out. Then, both you and I will face punishment." The black dragon seemed very impatient. I know. It's not easy to come out, and I still have to listen to your nagging. Annoying." After that, the black dragon hung up and disappeared again in a flash. When it reappeared, it was already thousands of kilometers away. In the next 2 days, the black dragon was still wandering around the flaming beginning continent. It did not go to the bases to kill. Instead, it kept wandering in the wilderness. But when it encountered lone humans in the wilderness, it would still reach out its claws without hesitation. Of course, those general corpses could not escape its claws. As long as it encountered creatures in the wilderness, no matter if they were general corpses or humans, it would kill them. On this day, it saw a mountain in the distance. This mountain was about 10,000 meters high. The entire mountain was covered in a layer of earthy yellow light. A base was formed around this mountain, within a radius of 100 kilometers. There were far more humans in this base than in other bases. But to its surprise, the base's walls were not high and did not look very sturdy. But there were not many general corpses in such a place. It even seemed that the general corpses were very afraid of this place. It seemed that they were afraid of something on this mountain. This made Kong Jiu a little confused. What the hell is on this mountain? Why don't you let me take a look? As he spoke, he circled around the base. The people in the base also noticed the black dragon. These days, the news of this evil dragon had spread throughout the continent. When people saw this evil dragon, they all cried out in surprise. Evil dragon! The evil dragon is attacking. Hide underground! Open the door of the shelter, quick! Kong Jiu could not help but laugh out loud when he heard the words, shelter. Ha 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 ha! You lowly creatures, are you trying to make me laugh to death? Shelter? I'll make you feel lonely. As he spoke, he swept down from the sky. A pair of thick hind claws viciously clawed at the ground. Two huge ravines that were 1,000 meters long and 70 to 80 meters wide suddenly appeared on the ground. Rumble, the so-called air raid shelter that the humans had just called, was instantly destroyed. All the humans screamed and fled in all directions. The power of giant dragons was completely foreign, mysterious, and powerful to these humans. Many of them had cultivated for decades or even centuries. He thought that he was already very strong. But in front of this huge dragon, they were like a bunch of ants. The air raid shelter that they thought was impregnable was like an ant's nest in front of this giant dragon. This giant dragon didn't even use energy. Just its physical strength alone was enough to destroy everything. This filled their hearts with despair. Rumble, rumble. The evil dragon continued to wreak havoc. There was only one thing it loved in its life, and that was destruction. His superiors did not allow him to wreak havoc on this continent. He had been holding it in for a few days and had long been suffocated. It just so happened that there were many humans around the mountain today, so he decided to indulge himself for a day. With a swing of its giant tail, a large number of houses were destroyed amidst a cloud of dust. Hundreds of humans were sent flying. With a swing of its sharp claws, huge ravines appeared on the ground. It was as if there were huge wounds on the ground. Amidst the rumbling sounds of buildings being destroyed, amidst the screams of the humans before they died, the evil dragon let out a laugh that sounded like sawing wood. Ha 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 ha. It was as if its perverted mind was satisfied amidst the destruction. At this moment, when these people were facing the end of the world, a voice suddenly sounded. Bastard, how dare you come to the flame-beginning ancient sect to cause trouble? You're courting death. Everyone looked up. In the sky, a figure was floating there. It was a lowly who looked to be about 12 or 13 or 14 years old. She had a pair of ponytails. Her appearance was very lovable. However, the way she spoke did not look like a lowly. Instead, she looked like a rough man. However, everyone knew that this person was none other than the sect master of the flame-beginning ancient sect, Luo Li. A pair of angel-like energy wings grew from her back as she floated in the air. In front of the 1,000-meter-long giant dragon, she seemed so small. However, at this moment, in the hearts of these humans, her figure was so tall. When the giant dragon saw that this human was so daring, it sneered. A mere ant dares to be so arrogant in front of a giant dragon. Let me see what you're capable of. Luo Li did not hesitate. In this world, there hasn't been a dragon slayer. I'll be the first one. As she said that, she moved her mind. A surge of dark green energy gushed out from behind her. This energy quickly condensed and took form behind her back. Soon, it condensed into a 1,000-meter-tall giant energy shadow. This giant energy shadow condensed a 2,000-meter-long giant spear in its right hand. Those who did not see this scene would never be able to imagine how shocking this scene was. This 1,000-meter-tall giant seemed to be connected to the sky and earth. The spear in its hand seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth. At a certain moment, this giant shadow roared. The spear in its right hand viciously pierced toward the giant dragon's chest. Puff! With a loud sound, the giant dragon was directly pierced by the giant's spear. When everyone saw this scene, they were all delighted. It hit! It hit! After the giant shadow pierced the giant dragon, it slowly disappeared. Only the giant dragon in the sky was left. In the giant dragon's chest, there was a 20-meter-wide giant hole. Blood fell from the sky like a waterfall. On the ground, a huge pool of blood quickly formed. In the pool of blood, blood mist lingered and blood qi overflowed. It looked very terrifying. The giant dragon's body was also constantly trembling. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Luo Li snorted coldly. A mere beast, even death can't wipe out its crimes. However, just as he finished speaking, the giant dragon in the sky that was already on the verge of collapse swayed twice and suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already behind Luo Li. At this time, there were no wounds on its body. On the ground, all the humans who saw this scene exclaimed in surprise. They clearly saw that the giant dragon's chest was pierced and blood was flowing like a waterfall. Why was it unharmed now? Luo Li's expression also changed and he cursed. Damn it, what the hell? Ha 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 ha. The giant dragon's unpleasant laughter could be heard. Lowly creature. How dare you try to kill a giant dragon? Are you King joking? As it spoke, it faced Luo Li and revealed its 10-meter-long claws that shone with a cold light. Chapter 508. Lori, a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. He thought that he was at the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. However, his full-powered attack had clearly pierced through the dragon's body. However, after the dragon's pierced body disappeared and reappeared, it was completely unharmed. This was completely beyond the knowledge of the people of the Flaming Origin continent. It was also beyond Lori's knowledge. At this moment, the dragon faced Lori and bared its sharp fangs. It extended its sharp claws that gleamed with cold light. Lori's attack had used up more than half of his energy. Seeing that the dragon was about to unleash its power, he had no choice but to dodge. She flapped her wings and instantly flew into the distance. Her speed was extremely fast. In almost an instant, she was already dozens of kilometers away. However, the dragon's body flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in front of her. Then the huge tail smashed down on Lori's head. Lori wanted to dodge but suddenly realized that she couldn't move at all. It was as if she had been imprisoned. In fact, it wasn't that she was imprisoned. It was that the space she was in had been imprisoned. This evil dragon was a space-type dragon. It could control the space within a certain range. When it used spatial imprisonment, it was as if the space was completely locked. Everything in the space couldn't move. Seeing the huge tail that was hundreds of meters long and dozens of meters thick coming down on her, Lori cursed in her heart. F***ck. I'm finished just like that. All the humans on the ground were terrified when they saw this scene. The sect master of the Flaming Origin ancient sect was their life insurance. It was because of sect master Luo that the general corpse didn't dare to come close. If sect master Luo died, even if the evil dragon didn't kill them, they would probably die under the general corpse's claws in the near future. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind the dragon without any warning. He was dressed in black and had an ordinary appearance. On his back was a pair of fiery red flame wings that looked very beautiful. In his right hand, a black chain was slowly thrown out. This chain was like a black snake that slithered through the air. In the blink of an eye, it had wrapped around the giant dragon's tail. Of course, the dragon also saw the black chain. However, it didn't take it to heart at all. Its tail was tens of meters thick. In its eyes, this chain was like a child's toy. How could it possibly take it to heart? However, when the chain wrapped around its tail, which was swinging downwards, suddenly stopped. The chain was pulled taut and its tail was suspended in the air. When the people on the ground saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. A human was like an ant in front of a 1,000-meter-long dragon. However, this human used the chain to stop the dragon's tail from smashing down. This was truly inconceivable. Seizing the opportunity, Luo Li fled far away. He turned to Mo Shi and said, "Brother, thank you very much. Otherwise I would have lost my life." When the evil dragon saw that its tail was actually stopped by a mere ant, it was surprised and also a little annoyed. A mere ant dares to be so presumptuous? Amidst its anger, it suddenly turned around. Its giant tail swept horizontally and smashed towards Mo Shi. Mo Shi's figure flashed and appeared on the right side. He dodged the sweep of the tail, grabbed the chain at the same time, dragged the giant dragon, and smashed it towards the ground. This huge force was ruthlessly thrown towards the ground. Rumble, the 1,000-meter-long giant dragon was heavily smashed to the ground. A huge pit with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters was smashed into the ground. The ground around the huge pit cracked inch by inch. This scene was extremely visually impactful. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. Luo Li also gave Mo Shi a thumbs up from afar. "Brother, you're so King awesome." The giant dragon was heavily thrown. Although it wasn't injured, it was aggrieved. As the saying went, the damage wasn't great, but the humiliation was extremely strong. In its eyes, humans were completely ants. Perhaps in the entire history of the giant dragons, no giant dragon had ever been smashed to the ground by a mere ant in such a humiliating manner. In its fury, an extremely hoarse voice came from its throat. "Lowly reptile, you're courting death." As it spoke, its figure flashed and disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in the sky. However, even if it used the teleportation technique, when it teleported to another location, it found that the inconspicuous black chain was still wrapped around its tail. What the hell was this thing? Naturally, it didn't know that this was the system's reward to Mo Shi, the dragon binding rope. And this wasn't its strongest form. If it was in its strongest form, this giant dragon probably wouldn't even be able to move. The dragon binding rope was condensed from the flesh and blood of infected creatures. Mo Shi had also condensed this dragon binding rope from the flesh and blood of a small number of infected creatures in a moment of desperation. If there were more infected creatures around, the effect of the condensed dragon binding rope would be much stronger than this one. The giant dragon saw that it couldn't use teleportation to get rid of the dragon binding rope. It simply stopped trying to get rid of it. Instead, it directly flashed its huge sharp claws and teeth at Mo Shi. It wanted to use its body to forcefully crush this lowly reptile. It wanted to let this lowly reptile know how big the gap between humans and giant dragons was. Its sharp claws slashed fiercely at Mo Shi. Mo Shi teleported and dodged its sharp claws. Then, a large saber appeared in his right hand. This large knife still looked unremarkable. From the shape, it looked like the pig slaughtering knife on Earth. However, compared to the pig slaughtering knife, it was a little bigger. It was more than 2 meters long. There were even a few circles of cloth on the handle of the knife. It looked completely like a street stall. The energy in Mo Shi's body crazily poured into this knife. The giant dragon didn't care about this knife at all. A hoarse voice came from its throat. "Reptile, die!" As it spoke, its sharp claws had already grabbed at Mo Shi. Mo Shi sneered. The dragon salyer in his right hand was raised high. "Today, with the long knife in hand, I will slay the dragon." The dragon salyer in his hand suddenly slashed down diagonally. He didn't see any energy from the dragon salyer, nor did he see any blade chi from the dragon salyer. A crack instantly appeared in the center of the giant dragon's body. The upper half of its body slid diagonally to the left. Soon, it was separated into 2 halves. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. The 2 halves of the dragon corpse fell from the sky. In the end, it crashed heavily onto the ground. Blood splattered everywhere. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they were all scared out of their wits. Chapter 509. 1,000-meter-long dragon had been so easily slain by a human. Everyone present was dumbfounded. They all turned their heads and fixed their gazes on Mo Shi. Who was this human? How could he be so strong? With a casual wave of his saber, he killed the dragon. One had to know that sect leader Luo was a superhero in their eyes. He was the ceiling of the entire Flaming Land's combat strength. But even sect leader Luo couldn't do anything to this dragon, and he almost died under the tail of this dragon. But now, this man had slaughtered this giant dragon with just a casual slash of his sword. This was truly inconceivable. Mo Shi was also slightly stunned. Was slaying a dragon so simple? That was impossible. He was now a level 1 Grand Desolate Master, equivalent to a level 1 evolved dragon. He had just looked at the level of this dragon. It was a level 5 evolved dragon. Although he was a 4-winged demonic dragon, his combat strength was extremely strong. He could challenge these level 5 evolved dragons by 4 or 5 levels. But it was impossible to kill them with a single slash. Was this dragon-slaying saber that strong? Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw the huge dragon corpse on the ground flash and then suddenly disappear. When it reappeared, the dragon had already appeared behind Mo Shi. It made a squeaking sound from its throat. Gaga gaga. A mere reptile. Do you really think you can slay a dragon? Mo Shi hurriedly turned around. He saw that the dragon was slightly flapping its wings and hovering not far behind him. And it seemed that this guy was still unscathed. When all the humans saw this scene, they were shocked again. Is this guy unkillable? It has clearly been cut in half, but it can still appear intact. What kind of technique is this? It's over, we're over. It's really over. At this moment, Mo Shi finally understood. This should be some kind of spatial illusion. On the surface, it looked like he had cut this guy, but in reality he hadn't. A spatial dragon was not easy to deal with. At this moment, the dragon's huge tail slapped down at Mo Shi. Wherever the huge tail passed, the air seemed to be distorted. With a thought, Mo Shi's figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already thousands of kilometers away. The giant dragon was slightly surprised. There's actually someone who can teleport so far in this broken place? In the next moment, his mind moved. Mo Shi, who had just disappeared, reappeared at his original spot. Mo Shi couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this. This guy's spatial ability was truly a little perverse. He had already escaped for over 1,000 kilometers, but he was still caught by it. Ha ha ha. Do you think I can't do anything to you just because you've escaped thousands of kilometers away? Lowly human, pathetic reptile. Dang. As he spoke, his giant tail once again smashed towards Mo Shi. This time, Mo Shi wanted to use the dragon shadow step to escape, but he was unable to do so. His space was also sealed. The gigantic dragon's gigantic tail, which was hundreds of meters long and tens of meters thick, was already smashing towards him. In a moment of desperation, Mo Shi hurriedly sent out a thought. In the next moment, his figure instantly disappeared. The giant dragon's gigantic tail swept past the place where he had just been and then smashed heavily on the ground. Rumble, a huge ravine, which was thousands of meters long, was directly smashed into the ground. It was as if a rift valley had instantly appeared on the ground. Under this smash, the ground shook violently. People couldn't even stand properly. They all squatted down or simply sat on the ground. At the same time, they were a little worried about Mo Shi in their hearts. Just now it seemed to have hit that person. It seemed that it didn't hit him again. They didn't see it clearly at all. Soon, the giant dragon gave an answer. It looked at the place where Mo Shi had disappeared. It chuckled. Hiding in space? Interesting. However, there was still a hint of disdain in his words. Playing with space in front of a space-type giant dragon was completely looking for trouble. He waved his right front claw gently, trying to pull Mo Shi out of that space. However, with this wave, he found that the space didn't move at all. This piqued his interest. Looks like it's an interesting little toy. As a space-type giant dragon, he had always had a special liking for space-type treasures. Now that he found a space treasure that even he couldn't control, he was naturally very interested. Since I can't pull you out, I'll have to go in personally. As he said that, he moved his mind. The giant figure instantly disappeared. All the humans present thought that this evil dragon would quickly appear elsewhere after disappearing, just like before. However, out of their expectations, after this evil dragon disappeared, it didn't appear again. After waiting for a full 5 minutes, they still didn't see the evil dragon appear. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. What's going on? Gone? That evil dragon and that human both disappeared. No matter what, as long as they're not here, it's equivalent to temporarily escaping death. These humans were all rejoicing. The flame-beginning ancient sect leader, Luo Li, shook her head slightly. The pair of ponytails on her head swayed rhythmically as she shook her head. What a good person, what a pity. At the same time, in Mo Shi's micro-world, Emma was talking to her son by the lake. Emma liked life here very much. There were no fights, no disturbances. Most importantly, her son was no longer stupid here. Instead, he had become very smart and sensible. Therefore, unless there were any special circumstances, she would always stay here and accompany her son. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared. The mother and son were very familiar with this situation. Big brother Mo. Emma now called Mo Shi Big brother Mo. Her son also greeted Mo Shi. Uncle Mo is here. Mo sure didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up at the sky. The mother and son didn't know what was going on. They also looked up at the sky. With a single glance, both of their expressions changed drastically. They saw a shadow suddenly appear in the sky. Gradually, the shadow became solid. It was actually a black giant dragon that was 1,000 meters long. From the head, it looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. Although the mother and son had seen Mo sure transform into a giant dragon before, the giant dragon that Mo sure transformed into had no evil intentions towards them. Therefore, they didn't find it very scary. However, when this giant dragon appeared, the mother and son felt a sense of terror from the bottom of their hearts. Big brother Mo, isn't this an illusion created by you? Emma asked. She also knew who Mo sure was in this space. As long as Mo sure thought about it, he could create this world. With another thought, he could destroy this world. That was why she asked. In the sky, the giant dragon heard and laughed. An illusion created by him? You think too highly of him. Forget it. I'm not going to talk nonsense with you lowly insects. Die. Chapter 5:10. In the sky, the giant dragon spoke in human language with a hoarse voice. Is he an illusion? You think too highly of him. Lowly reptiles, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Die. As he spoke, he used his mind to seal the space where Mo sure, Emma, and the others were. Then, his huge tail once again smashed toward Mo sure and the others. On the giant dragon's ferocious face, a ferocious and human-like smile appeared. It seemed to have seen the scene of these humans being smashed into meat paste. However, at this moment, its huge tail that was smashing down suddenly became motionless. It was as if it was caught by an invisible giant hand. But it knew that this was not an invisible giant hand, but the space where its tail was located was locked. He looked at the three humans in front of him in surprise. How was this possible? How could these three mere insects lock down the space he was in? What surprised him the most was that he tried all kinds of methods to break free from this space lock. However, it was no use at all. The space where he was seemed to have formed a huge invisible ice block. And it had become a frozen fly in this piece of ice. Regardless of whether it used its physical strength or spatial skills, it was of no use. No, this is impossible. He roared in his heart. His body kept struggling. However, no matter how hard he tried, his body did not move. At this moment, hiss! His tail was suddenly torn off by a huge force. Blood immediately poured down like heavy rain. Roar! The Shurlong screamed in pain. He could feel that this was still some kind of spatial skill. His body was in this space. And when the space was torn apart, his body would naturally be torn apart as well. This time, panic finally appeared in his heart. What it was most proud of was its spatial skills. With its spatial skills, it could challenge other evolved dragons that were several levels higher. But now, all his spatial skills were completely useless here. And he could only watch his body being torn apart by the other party's spatial skills. Obviously, the other party had a spatial skill that was far more advanced than his. It had been crushed in the field it was best at. How could this not make him panic? Rip! Along with the sound of cloth being torn, its wings were torn off. It wanted to open its mouth and spit out flames. However, it found that it couldn't even spit out flames. In the next moment, Ryup, its pair of front claws were torn off from its body by a tremendous force. Oh! It screeched in terror. However, this was not the end. Rip! A pair of its hind legs were torn off. Fresh blood fell from the sky like a blood-red waterfall. Once again, a pool of blood formed on the ground. However, this time, it was unable to recover. Rip! Its head was directly twisted off. Of course, the dragon wasn't dead yet. The vitality of dragons was extremely strong. Even if the head was cut off, the head could still live for several months. But at this time, the huge head let out a miserable shriek. No! As it screamed, its head was split in half. It was as if an invisible knife had sliced it open from the middle. Finally, under Mo sure's thought, the 1,000-meter-long dragon's body directly exploded. However, it didn't explode into a cloud of blood mist. Instead, it exploded into a colorful, extremely gorgeous firework with a diameter of 10 kilometers in the sky. At this point, The evil dragon Kongjiu was dead. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in Mo Shi's mind. Killed 11 dragons. Level up. Name, Mo Shi. Level. Level 2 Great Desolate Master. Level 2 Evolved Dragon. Level 10 Long Nian Shi. Ability. Click to expand. He easily leveled up. However, it wasn't easy. It was because this dragon followed him to the miniature world that he was able to kill it. Otherwise, with its spatial skills, he really couldn't do anything to it. It seemed that he had to be careful when he encountered a dragon in the future. Mo Shi asked in his mind, how many dragons do I need to kill for the next level up? The system's voice sounded. Killed 10 dragons. Mo Shi nodded. It wasn't a lot. Emma and her son still didn't know whether the dragon just now was real or fake. In this world, Mo Shi was God. There was nothing that Mo Shi couldn't do. In their opinion, that dragon was probably condensed by Mo Shi to make them happy. Mo Shi looked at the gorgeous fireworks in the sky and asked, is it beautiful? Emma and her son nodded. It's beautiful. Mo Shi looked at the fireworks that were still exploding and said, if it's beautiful, then look at it a little longer. I'm tired. I'm going to rest for a while. After saying that with a thought, his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the Dragon Valley of the miniature world. Next to the waterfall in the Dragon Valley, there was a peach forest. In the peach forest, there was a thatched hut. Mo Shi's figure instantly appeared in the thatched hut. Lying on the bed in the thatched hut, listening to the sound of the waterfall outside the house, looking at the colorful peach blossoms outside the window, it was really a kind of enjoyment. But at this time, Mo Shi didn't enjoy it. Instead, in his mind, he flipped through the dragon's memory. Generally speaking, after becoming a dragon, more or less, would have a little bit of dragon consciousness. Dragon consciousness was extremely protective of their brain. So it was almost impossible to plunder the memory of a real dragon. But in this miniature world, it was different. Mo Shi could plunder the memory of whoever he wanted. Even if the dragon god came to this world, it would be played in the palm of Mo Shi's hand. That dragon had a long life and had lived for more than 3,000 years. Its memory was also very complicated. Mo Shi spent more than 3 hours to finish reading its memory. And after reading its memory, Mo Shi felt like he had eaten a fly. Because, from the dragon's memory, he knew that the Flaming Land was actually just a laboratory in the dragon's world, or rather, an experimental continent. Flaming Land, wasn't that an experiment? Everyone on Earth thought that humans were the masters of all things. But in reality, Earth was just a hunting ground of the Flaming Land. Now the people on the Flaming Land thought that the Flaming Land was the most developed place in the entire universe. But in reality, the Flaming Land was just an experimental place in the dragon's world. F***CK. Mo Shi couldn't help but curse. Was there an end to it? This feeling was like Deadpool discovering that he was just a comic character in a book, and everything around him was just a comic world. Mo Shi shook his head repeatedly. Chapter 5:11. Mo Shi felt like he had eaten a fly as he continued to look through the dragon's memories. The dragon's world was not a planet. Instead, it was a large star field. There were a total of 3,600 planets in this star field. There were dragons living on every planet. This was called the 10,000 Dragon Star Field, or simply the 10,000 Dragon Realm. In the dragon's knowledge, the 10,000 Dragon Realm was the center of the entire universe. And this was not just the dragon's knowledge, it was very likely the truth. Because in the known universe, almost all the star fields revolved around the 10,000 Dragon Realm. Other than that, these dragons did not find any other similar star fields. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were countless dragons. These dragons were not only powerful, but their technology was also a level higher than that of the Flaming Land. In the 10,000 Dragon Realm, there were tens of thousands of laboratories. These laboratories had been around for a long time. For example, the Flaming Land was one of the laboratories. It had been more than 500,000 years since the Flaming Land had intelligent life. In fact, these intelligent life forms were scattered in the Flaming Land by the laboratories. Every creature in the Flaming Land had a specific number. The Flaming Land's name in the 10,000 Dragon Realm was Laboratory 666. The dragon scientists had set up an invisible barrier outside each laboratory. No matter how strong the creatures in the laboratory were or how advanced the technology was, they could not fly out of this barrier. For example, the 666 Laboratories barrier was the border of the solar system where the Flaming Land was located. No matter how strong the people of the Flaming Land were or how advanced their technology was, they could never fly out of the solar system. Because at the border of the solar system, there was a barrier with a temperature of 30,000 degrees. As long as they touched this barrier, they would be instantly melted. The pitiful people of the Flaming Land were equivalent to birds in a cage. It was just that until now, they had not realized this fact. Mo sure saw this and felt like he had been f***ed by a dog. When he came to the Flaming Land from Earth, he thought he had escaped the cage. He did not expect that the Flaming Land was just an even bigger cage. However, Mo sure would not resign himself to fate just like that. The 10,000 Dragon Realm, right? One day, I will kill the 10,000 Dragon Realm. I'll let you dragons, who think you're the masters, have a taste of being dominated. After spending 3 hours, Mo sure finished looking through the giant dragon's macroscopic memories. Next, it was time to deal with some specific matters. Kong Jiao was an investigator sent to the Flaming Land. They were mainly responsible for research. To put it bluntly, they were here to observe the changes in the Flaming Continent over the past tens of thousands of years since the dragons had left. Although Kong Jiao was here to do research, he was actually just a temporary worker hired because there was a shortage of manpower in the laboratory. Kong Jiao's nature was to wreak havoc. Coming here, he naturally had to wreak havoc. Now that Mo sure had killed him, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't cause a huge commotion. That would depend on whether those people would pursue the matter. After all, Kong Jiao was only a temporary worker and had not even signed a contract. There was no guarantee of personal safety. Moreover, it didn't have any family. It was just a hooligan. If the laboratory didn't pursue the matter, this matter would be over. However, if they encountered a serious researcher, they might not let go of this matter. Next, at least 5 dragon investigation teams would come to the Flaming Land to investigate. The strength of these investigation teams was not strong. However, if they died in the Flaming Land, then there would be more dragons coming to the Flaming Land. If this continued, Mo sure would have to face thousands of dragons in the future. Mo sure smiled bitterly. In the end, he still had to go against the dragons? Since the system had already planned for his future development, and things were indeed developing in the opposite direction of the dragons. So what if he became an enemy of the dragons? Thinking of this, Mo sure's blood gradually boiled in his chest. He seemed to have seen the scene of himself facing thousands of dragons. Although there were thousands of dragons, he would go against the whole world. This feeling was really a little King cool. In fact, this was the adventurous nature of the demon dragon in Mo sure's body after he evolved into a 4-winged demonic dragon. At the same time in the outside world, those who were lucky enough to survive were secretly delighted when they didn't see the dragon and the human for a long time. The giant dragon finally left. However, at the same time, they were secretly worried. They didn't know how the human was now. Would he have died under the claws of the dragon? Lori had already landed on the ground. His gaze had been fixed on the spot where Mo sure and the giant dragon had disappeared into just now. Although the city was now empty, he had a vague feeling that the human was not dead. As for why he had this feeling, he didn't know. Therefore he just stared at that place. After more than 10 minutes, the air in that area suddenly distorted. Soon, a figure slowly appeared there. This figure looked very ordinary with an ordinary appearance. However, Lori recognized it at a glance. This was that person. Mo sure could accelerate time in his own miniature world. Therefore, he looked through Long Jiao's memories in the miniature world for 4 hours and even slept. Only 10 minutes had passed on the Flaming Land. Seeing Mo sure appear, the people on the ground were all stunned. He's back. Where's the dragon? He looks unscathed. Could it be that he killed that evil dragon? How is that possible? You've seen the strength of that evil dragon. Do you think it's so easy to kill it? At this time, Lori condensed a pair of energy wings on his back and soared into the sky again. He cupped his fists at Mo sure. Thank you for saving me from danger just now. May I know your name? Mo sure glanced at Lori, then glanced at the humans below. He said indifferently. Soon, something big will happen. After he finished speaking, his figure flashed, and he had already disappeared. Lori was stunned. Damn, is he not giving me face at all? At this time the Grand Elder below said. Sect Master. He's Island Master MO of the first hunting island. Lori heard this and nodded slightly. Island Master MO of the first hunting island? Interesting indeed. Hearing this, the rest of the humans came to a realization. He's Island Master MO of the first hunting island. I've heard from others that the strongest person on the Flaming Land is Island Master MO of the first hunting island. Today, I finally see him in person. I heard that he's the strongest person on the continent. However, as for how strong he is, no one knows. If that's the case, then perhaps he really did slay that evil dragon. Chapter 5:12. Mo sure did not care about those humans' admiration, gratitude, envy, and even gratitude to the ancient flame sect leader. He did not kill the giant dragon to save these people. He only did it to complete the mission given by the system and improve his strength. Moreover, he had understood a principle a long time ago. Not all efforts would be rewarded, and not all good intentions would be rewarded. Many times, you put in a lot of effort but come up empty-handed. Many times, if you are kind to others and they are grateful to you, they may turn around and stab you in the back. Even if they do not stab you in the back, they will not be grateful. Therefore, Mo sure was indifferent to many things. After returning to the first hunting island, he was thinking about how to improve his strength. This time, the battle with the space dragon allowed him to understand the power of the space element. If he did not use any skills and just fought head-on, he could have easily killed that giant dragon. However, after the giant dragon used its space element skill, even he could only escape. If he did not escape into the miniature world, he might not have been able to kill that giant dragon. Therefore it was imperative to improve his strength. However, it was difficult to improve his strength by killing those infected creatures. Therefore, Mo sure was considering whether he should take the initiative to attack instead of waiting for those giant dragons to come. Go directly to the Myriad Dragon Realm? Kill those giant dragons in the Myriad Dragon Realm and improve his strength. Of course, this would require him to take a huge risk. It was best not to go before he had a good plan. At the same time, in the Myriad Dragon Realm, on one of the planets, in a research institute, a human was sitting leisurely in an office. To be exact, he was not a human. He was a giant dragon. Although the giant dragons looked down on humans, they had to admit that the human body was much more convenient than their dragon body in daily life. The smallest dragon body was 100 meters long. Many of them were thousands of meters long. With such a huge body, it had a huge advantage in battle. In the entire universe, there were no races that could be a match for the Dragon Clan. However, in daily life, it brought them a lot of inconvenience. For example, their huge bodies were a hindrance when it came to delicate work like scientific research. On the contrary, the seemingly small and weak bodies of humans were very handy in this kind of work. Thus, the dragons used an advanced genetic medicine to temporarily transform their bodies into human bodies. This drug allowed them to freely switch between their human and dragon forms. This dragon was called Xianxia. The giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon Realm all had their own attributes. Generally, dragons used their attributes as their surnames. For example, Kong Jiao was a space-type giant dragon, so his surname was Kong. Xianxia was a giant dragon of the water attribute, so his surname was Water. Xianxia and Kong Jiao were playmates who played together when they were young. After growing up, Xianxia became a researcher while Kong Jiao had nothing to do and became a slacker. In recent years, Kong Jiao came to Xianxia and asked him to find a good job for him. Xianxia had no choice but to arrange for Kong Jiao to be the investigator. The job was very simple. It was to go to those experimental planets to investigate and then report the actual situation of those planets. There was nothing technical about it. But Kong Jiao, this guy would feel uncomfortable all over if he did not stir up trouble for a day. Over the past month, he had stirred up quite a bit of trouble. Xianxia had to clean up after him every time. This time, he went to experimental planet number 666 and this guy went around slaughtering the creatures of that planet. If this was discovered by the supervisor, he would be fired. Xianxia originally planned to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666 and bring that guy back if it really did not work out. But he did not expect that guy to suddenly lose contact. He had not been able to contact him for several days. Even when he used the long-range life detector to detect, he did not discover the existence of that guy. It was as if he suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. This was an unexpected surprise. If that guy could really disappear from the face of the earth, then he would thank the heavens and earth. But Shui Yang was also somewhat surprised at the same time. Logically speaking, with the strength of a giant dragon's body, on experimental planet number 666, there was no creature that could hurt him. How could he suddenly disappear without a trace? Could it be that on that planet, a more powerful creature had already evolved? Although this idea was somewhat absurd, he still kept it in mind. Looks like he had to find an opportunity to personally make a trip to experimental planet number 666. After Wang Yi dealt with Kong Jiu, from Kong Jiu's memories, he knew that under the Sea Heart waterfall, there was actually a spatial portal. It was a two-way portal from the Flaming Land to the Myriad Dragon Realm. At first, Mo Shi wondered if he could close this portal. But after thinking about it, he decided not to. Now, more than half of the Flaming Land had been infected by the general corpses. No matter how strong he was, he could not be faster than the general corpses. Even if he closed this portal, the Flaming Land would eventually reach the end of the world. And even if he closed this portal, with the means of the Myriad Dragon Realm, they could easily open it again. Therefore, he did not bother to do this. As for what to do if the giant dragons of the Myriad Dragon Realm came, Mo Shi had already thought of a countermeasure. At worst, he would move the entire Dragon Palace into the miniature world. The size of the miniature world now could completely accommodate the entire Dragon Palace. In the following days, Mo Shi basically killed those general corpses every day. Although the kill points obtained from killing these general corpses were very little compared to the 10 trillion that Wang Yi needed to level up. Even if he killed everyone in the Flaming Land, he would not be able to obtain 10 trillion kill points. But Wang Yi did not kill these general corpses just for the kill points. His true goal was to obtain evolution points. The more evolution points he had, the more demon-suppressing orbs he could sign in for. On this day, Mo Shi came to a city. In the past, this was a densely populated city. But now, there was not a single person in the city. Looking down at this city from the sky, he saw that this place was no longer as prosperous as it used to be. It was late autumn. This place was desolate. The fallen leaves on the streets kept rolling forward in the autumn wind. Collapsed walls, dilapidated buildings, and crooked doors all told that this city had once experienced a great battle. That was more than a month ago. This city was broken through by the general corpses. Almost all the humans were transformed into general corpses. There were only a few hundred survivors left, and they had already fled with their hoverboards. Logically speaking, if there were no humans within a radius of dozens of kilometers, the general corpses would lose their target and stay here, waiting for the next target to appear. But for some reason, the general corpses in this city had disappeared. The entire city seemed to be a ghost city. Chapter 513. When Mo Shi flew over the city, he felt a little strange. This city seemed to be different from the other cities that had been conquered by the general corpse. It was too quiet, so quiet that it felt a little strange. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at the city. He didn't find any problems. It was just that he felt that there was something wrong with this city. Originally, with his cautious personality, he wouldn't rashly go down at this time. However, the risk factor in the demon dragon genes made him want to go down and explore. After a while, he made up his mind. Then he would go down and take a look. After all, he was now the peak of the Flaming Land's combat power. And he was far stronger than the Flaming Land's combat power. On the Flaming Land, there weren't any creatures or weapons that could really hurt him. Thinking of this, he retracted his wings. He slowly floated down to the ground. Stepping on this street full of leaves, he felt that something was wrong with this city. As for what was wrong, he couldn't tell. In short, it was just a feeling. Mo Shi's dragon sense enveloped the entire city as he slowly walked forward. Currently, his level 10 dragon will could reach up to 10 kilometers underground. But even so, when he walked in the city, he didn't find anything. He slowly walked from the center of the city to the east. After walking for half an hour, he didn't find anything. He sped up and continued to explore the entire city. However, after spending a full hour, he still didn't find anything. In the end, Mo Shi shook his head. A pair of wings appeared on his back. He instantly catapulted to 1,000 meters in the air. He looked down at the wilderness around the city. Although it was late autumn, there were still many living creatures moving around in the wilderness. Although many of the plants were close to yellow, there was still some green. Especially some evergreen plants, they were still dark green at this time. On the other hand, the city was dark and gloomy. It was like the gray color that the screen turned after the protagonist died in a game. Mo Shi took one last look at this place and shook his head. He flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Not long after Mo Shi left, more than 50 kilometers underground in this city, a blood-red eye suddenly opened. In the next few days, Mo Shi continued to kill these general corpses. Without using the demon-suppressing orb, Mo Shi had used the dragon slaughtering saber to kill the general corpse. Basically, no matter how strong the general corpse was, the dragon slaughtering saber only needed one slash to finish it off. As he used the dragon salure more and more, he became more and more familiar with it. Furthermore, he discovered that the dragon salure seemed to be consciously accepting the energy in his body at times. For example, when he poured his energy into the dragon salure could only passively accept it at the beginning. But later on, it seemed to be absorbing his energy on its own. Even if he didn't inject it, it would still continue to absorb the energy in Mo Shi's body. Sometimes, Mo Shi was afraid that he would lose control and let the saber absorb too much energy. Fortunately, he was still able to control himself. With just a thought, he could cut off the transmission of energy. Of course, this saber absorbed a lot of energy, but it was also more spiritual than other sabers. Mo Shi had always felt that as soon as he raised the knife, it would know where to cut. This made Mo Shi suspect that the saber had its own consciousness. However, Mo Shi asked the system a few times, and the system's answer was negative. No. This made Mo Shi very puzzled. However, since he didn't understand things, Mo Shi temporarily put it to the back of his mind. On this day, Mo Shi came to another city. This city had already been breached. However, unlike before, there were countless general corpses in this city. Moreover, these general corpses were not of low levels. Mo Shi glanced over. Basically, more than half of these general corpses were evolved general corpses, which was equivalent to desolate hunters. One had to know that almost all the desolate hunters on the Flaming Dawn continent had fled. Almost all of the remaining were desolate hunters. After desolate hunters transformed into general corpses, although their strength would be greatly increased, it was impossible for them to directly break through from desolate hunters to desolate hunters. In other words, these general corpses had used some kind of method to become evolved general corpses after transformation. No one knew what method they used. However, Mo Shi didn't care about this. He only cared about killing. These general corpses, whether male or female, old or young, when they saw Mo Shi, a human, appear, they all roared and pounced towards Mo Shi. Mo Shi took out the dragon salure and poured the energy in his body into the dragon salure. When the general corpses approached, he waved his right hand lightly. He didn't see any energy spreading out. All the general corpses around him instantly disappeared. One slash, instantly killing thousands of evolved general corpses. However, this was just child's play. After he killed these thousands of evolved general corpses, tens of thousands of general corpses began to surge out from the surrounding buildings like a tide. All of them surged towards Mo Shi. They were like a torrent, wanting to drown Mo Shi. Like a giant beast, they wanted to devour Mo Shi. Mo Shi estimated that there were about 100,000 general corpses in the entire city. And at this moment, these hundreds of thousands of general corpses were all rushing towards Mo Shi. If one were to look down from the sky, it would make one's scalp go numb. However, Mo Shi remained motionless in the face of so many general corpses. The tip of the dragon salure in his right hand was pressed against the ground. Energy flowed along his right arm and continuously poured into the dragon salure. At this moment, he actually had a feeling. The dragon salure was very excited. It seemed to be a little excited. It was eager to give it a try. When the general corpses were only 100 meters away from him, and would be able to pounce on him with just one more jump, Mo Shi finally moved. The dragon salure in his right hand gently swung out in a circle. At this moment, all the general corpses that were pouncing towards him disappeared. It was as if everything that had happened just now was just a nightmare. When the dream was over, everything disappeared. These hundreds of thousands of general corpses, and half of them had reached the level of hunters evolved general corpses. Under Mo Shi's slash, they all disappeared in an instant. If this scene was seen by others, they would probably be shocked to the point of being a god. Even the sect master of the flame-beginning ancient sect, that level 10 great desolate master, was far from being able to do this. Mo Shi instantly killed hundreds of thousands of general corpses with a single slash. However, he did not relax. Instead, he once again poured the energy in his body into the dragon Salyer, because he could feel that there was still a big boss hidden in this city. Sure enough, a moment later, a figure slowly appeared from the ruins in the distance. Chapter 5:14. The figure had the outline of a human. However, it was 300 meters tall. There were circles of fat on its body, making it look like a spokesperson for Michelin tires. Just the stubble on the side of his huge mouth was as thick as a tree. It was completely naked as it stared at Mo Shi in the distance. It let out a roar from its throat. A mere human dares to hurt the descendant of Jianghu? You're courting death. Its voice was extremely hoarse, as if it was sawing wood. Mo Shi sized up the general corpse from top to bottom. The blood demons I had already seen its level. Species, general corpse. Level 3 super evolved. A level 3 super evolved general corpse was equivalent to a level 3 grand desolate master. The evolution of these general corpses was too fast. It had only been slightly more than 3 months since the first corpse had been retrieved. In such a short time, a super evolved general corpse equivalent to a grand desolate master had appeared. Mo Shi couldn't help but frown slightly. If the evolution speed was like this, would there be an existence stronger than a level 10 grand desolate master? However, he was soon relieved. The 10,000 Dragon Realm had strict restrictions on the combat strength of these laboratory creatures. No matter how strong the creatures on these experimental planets were, their final combat strength couldn't exceed the limit. On the flaming beginning continent, the highest level of the creatures on experimental planet 666 was equivalent to a level 10 grand desolate master. Therefore, Mo Shi could be at ease as the ceiling of his combat strength. With a thought, Mo Shi first plundered the general corpse's memories. However, after looking at these memories, Mo Shi shook his head. This general corpse's memories were very chaotic. Its memories were made up of countless fragmented memory fragments. Moreover, many of these memories didn't seem to be its own memories. It should have received the memories of some other creatures. There was no way to find the pattern of these memories, nor could he piece them together. Mo Shi didn't bother about these things anymore. Looking at the giant Michelin spokesperson that was more than 300 meters tall, he said mockingly, "Descendant of Jianghu? You think too highly of yourself. At most, you're Jiangchun's fart." The general corpse roared. "How dare you? How dare you insult forefather Jianghu? You're courting death." As he spoke, he strode towards Mo Shi. Rumble, rumble, with every step it took, its huge feet left a fat footprint that was more than 50 meters long on the ground. With every step it took, the fat on its body jiggled like jelly. The old bird between its legs was also constantly swaying. Mo Shi felt a chill run down his spine. This guy's appearance was too disgusting. It arrived in front of Mo Shi and stomped down on Mo Shi with its gigantic foot. Mo Shi leaped back lightly, causing the giant palm to miss. Rumble, the giant foot missed and stepped on the ground, causing the ground to shake a few times. The next step was certain. Crack, crack, crack. The giant foot began to split into 5-meter-thick python-like tentacles, which shot toward Mo Shi to entangle him. Mo Shi's figure flashed again, retreating more than 100 meters. Although the giant pythons couldn't reach Mo Shi, they all opened their mouths. Their mouths were like pea shooters, shooting out hundreds of blood-red beans. All the blood beans were the size of a human head. They shot towards Mo Shi like bullets. When they were 5 meters in front of Mo Shi, they all opened up. Only then did Mo Shi realize that these blood beans were actually blood spiders. Each of them had 8 legs, and their small heads had blood-red fangs that were shaped like a figurehead. They looked very ferocious. These spiders all flew towards Mo Shi. This reminded Mo Shi of the face-huggers in Alien. They also flew to people's faces, burrowed into people's mouths, and laid eggs in people's stomachs. However, unlike those tragic characters in Alien, Mo was very strong. With a thought, he easily suspended these blood spiders in the air with his dragon will. But at this moment, the abdomens of these blood spiders shot out dark green beads. They shot towards Mo. Mo leaned to the side. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Several blood-red spider webs were nailed into the tree behind him, which was so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. The remaining leaves on the big tree quickly turned yellow. The trunk of the big tree quickly turned gray where it was shot, and grayish-white pus flowed out. In a moment, the entire tree turned gray, and a large amount of pus seeped out. What a good housework! Were these spider silks so poisonous? Mo also saw it. He raised his head and looked at the giant Michelin spokesperson. This guy's attack was really impossible to guard against. At first, it was just a stomp, which made people wonder why this guy's attack was so low. He didn't expect that this was just the beginning. Next, it split into tentacles, spit out spiders, and spit out spider silks. Mo didn't expect this. At this moment, the blood spiders and tentacles melted into gray liquid and wriggled towards its feet. Soon, they merged into its feet. Mo was secretly amazed. What kind of monster did this zombie virus create? The giant general corpse was also a little surprised. You lowly human are very agile. Try this again. As it spoke, its huge right hand clenched into a huge fist the size of 2 or 3 stories and suddenly punched towards Mo. To be precise, its fist didn't swing out like a human's. Instead, it was as if there was a spring in its arm that shot out directly. So it was extremely fast. Fortunately, Mo's speed wasn't slow either. He gently jumped to the right and dodged this punch. But suddenly, the left fist came at him again. Mo jumped again and dodged. At this moment, the guy's fists were like the wind, bouncing towards Mo. Mo dodged again and flashed back 10 meters. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was wrong under his feet. Looking down, he saw the grayish-white liquid seeping out of the big tree. Just as he noticed the grayish-white liquid, the ground under his feet suddenly changed again. The grayish-white liquid actually wriggled quickly and quickly wrapped around Mo's legs, and kept drilling under Mo's skin. Good job! This was the liquid that seeped out of the poisonous silk spat out by the blood spider's mouth after poisoning the big tree. He didn't expect that even this liquid could move. F***ck. This was a little ridiculous. Mo could only move his mind and instantly disappear. When he reappeared, he was already 1,000 meters away from the general corpse. The general corpse looked at Mo mockingly. You human are quite interesting. You can actually dodge my consecutive attacks, then, try this. Before it finished speaking, it suddenly felt a chill in its body. Then, its upper body diagonally slid to the left. Its body was actually broken into 2. There was still steam coming out of the broken part. Chapter 5:15. That giant general corpse's previous attack was already very strong. But in fact, that was not the manifestation of its true strength. Previously, this was just an appetizer. Its true combat strength was much more terrifying than what it had displayed earlier. However, Mo did not give it a chance to display its true strength. The dragon-slaying saber waved gently. The upper body of the giant general corpse slid down to the left. The giant general corpse felt that it did not move, its legs did not bend, and its waist did not bend. How did it get lower and lower? Looking at the other half of its body, it was shocked. He even said, "That's right. What a fast saber." However, he was only surprised. There was no fear at all. This was because the self-healing ability of a general corpse was already very abnormal. And after becoming a super-evolved general corpse, its self-healing ability was even more abnormal. To put it bluntly, even if you took its head off and used it as a ball, you could play a 90-minute match. Including the injury stoppage time, it would be a total of 95 minutes. After kicking it, you could put its head back. It could also come back to life at any time. Therefore, when Mo cut its body into 2, it did not panic at all. This was much better than having its head kicked like a ball. The fat on its face even squeezed out a smile. Looking at Mo it made a rustling sound like sawing wood. Lowly human, Do you really think you can kill me? Mo Shi ignored him and put away the dragon-slaying saber. A pair of wings condensed on his back, and with a leap, he was high into the sky. With a slight flap of his wings, he quickly flew to the next city. The general corpse was stunned and could not help but fly into a rage. Brat, who are you looking down on? Come back here. Do you really think this is the end? Even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will still hunt you down, chop you into pieces, and feed you to the corpse dog. However, when he said the last sentence, his aura suddenly lowered. The last word, dog, could only be seen moving his lips. Because it had discovered a terrifying fact. Its body, which should have healed on its own, was not healing on its own. Instead, it was quickly turning into mucus. No, how was this possible? How could it not heal on its own? Extreme fear and panic began to appear in its eyes. The reason why general corpses were so powerful was because they could not be killed. Therefore, even in the face of humans who were 10 times or even 100 times stronger than them, they still dared to fight head-on. But now, with a single slash from this guy, it actually lost its ability to heal itself. How could it not be afraid? Under such fear, his body turned into a pool of blood. Before it lost its last bit of consciousness, it still couldn't figure it out. How did this human do it? When the zombie general lost consciousness, Mo Shi, who was flying in the sky, suddenly heard the system's voice in his mind. Killed one super-evolved general corpse. Obtained 100 million kill points. Total kill points, 102,33408. Mo Shi paused. Previously, when he killed ordinary general corpses, he only gained 0.1 kill points. Only by killing an evolved general corpse could he gain 1 kill point. Killing another super-evolved general corpse would give him 100 million kill points? System, your slaughter point system is a little exaggerated. The system's voice quickly came. Every super-evolved general corpse has gone through countless trials of life and death, and stood out from millions or even tens of millions of general corpses. Their combat power, memory, physical strength, and other aspects far surpass evolved general corpses. So it's not exaggerated at all. Mo Shi chuckled. This isn't King exaggerated? That's 100 million times. Do you have any shame? The system immediately fell silent. When the system fell silent, Mo Shi felt helpless. But so be it if it collapsed. After all, according to the system's calculation, as long as he killed 9999 super-evolved general corpses, he would be able to level up again. But where would he find 9999 super-evolved general corpses? The system had just said that every super-evolved general corpse stood out from millions of general corpses. It was too difficult to find a super-evolved general corpse. System, where are the super-evolved general corpses? Can you give me a hint? Mo Shi asked. The system was speechless. Still, there was silence. Mo Shi felt helpless again. However, according to Mo Shi's thoughts, the higher the number of general corpses, the more likely it was for super-evolved general corpses to appear. Therefore, he had been going to the big cities for the past few days. In the base on the ground, the humans were surprised when they saw a human flying past them. In the current apocalyptic world, it was no longer suitable for survival outside the base. Other than the heroes with special abilities, the rest of the people, including the Grand Desolate Masters, could only stay in the base obediently. Now, this human was flying around in the sky all day long. Was he tired of living? While Mo Shi was killing the general corpses were constantly attacking the bases. When the bases were first built, there were more than 1,500 of them. Now, 3 months had passed, and more than 200 bases had been attacked. As the general corpses evolved faster, their abilities grew stronger as well. The bases were being attacked faster and faster. This once again caused a large-scale panic among the surviving humans. Everyone was pessimistic. It seemed like the humans could not fight against the super-evolved general corpses. The safe zone around the ancient flame sect was shrinking again and again. In the beginning, the safe zone was within 300 kilometers of the tumor. However, slowly, the safe zone was reduced to 150 kilometers. 100 kilometers. Now, the humans could only move within 80 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. General corpses began to appear outside of 80 kilometers. The ancient flame sect leader, Lori, killed the general corpses easily in the beginning. Gradually, it became more and more difficult for him to kill the general corpses. Among the humans, there was a saying that the last great cleansing of the apocalypse was coming. The humans had no hope anymore. This was the punishment from the heavens. The humans had been researching all kinds of viruses and thought that they could play with these viruses in the palm of their hands. Now, the humans were suffering the consequences of their own actions and were being played by the viruses. In such an environment, the number of super-evolved general corpses Mo encountered slowly increased. In the first few days, he encountered one. Later on, he encountered one almost every day. Now, he would encounter super-evolved general corpses in almost every city, regardless of whether it was a big city or a small town. His kill points were also constantly increasing. Gradually, his kill points were nearing 500. However, Mo felt that this was not fast enough. One must know that the 10,000 Dragon Realm would send people to Earth to investigate Kong Jiu's death. If he could not increase his abilities too much before that, his future would be very difficult. Chapter 5:16. Every time he killed a super-evolved general corpse, he would only get 1 million evolution points. However, he would get as many as 100 million kill points. It was obvious that the kill point system was broken, but the system refused to admit it. However, it was fine as long as it was beneficial to Mo. He had already killed more than 500 super-evolved general corpses. However, super-evolved general corpses were not easy to find. Basically, each city only had one super-evolved general corpse. Mo killed more than 20 cities' general corpses every day and only got 2 billion kill points. It seemed that he was still far from reaching 1 trillion kill points. However, Mo had no other choice. If he stayed on the Flaming Continent, he could only slowly increase his strength by killing super-evolved general corpses. As for going to the 10,000 Dragon Realm, Mo had not considered it yet. After all, it was too dangerous to go to the 10,000 Dragon Realm alone. Before his strength reached a certain level, Mo would not go there casually. On this day, Mo came to another city. This was a super-large city. Before the apocalypse, it should have been one of the top 3 cities on the Flaming Continent. In this super-large city, the population alone had reached more than 10 million. In other words, there should be more than 10 million general corpses gathered here. Mo used his dragon's will to scan the city. He could not help but be shocked. The general corpses in this city were all evolved general corpses. There was not even a normal general corpse. Evolved general corpses were more than 10 times more agile than normal general corpses. In terms of combat strength, they were also more than 10 times stronger than normal general corpses. There were more than 10 million general corpses in this city, which was equivalent to more than 10 million desolate hunters. What kind of terrifying force was this? Any force before the apocalypse, whether it was the ancient flaming sect or the dragon race, was nothing in front of the city's general corpses. If this force worked together, they could sweep through the entire Flaming Continent. If the humans who were already in despair knew of the existence of such a force, who knew how much despair they would feel? When Mo saw this, he smiled faintly and continued to walk forward. After all, with his current strength, this force was nothing but a fart in front of him. However, these evolved general corpses weren't the strongest forces in the city. In this city, other than these evolved general corpses, there were over 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. This surprised Mo. In the past, most of the cities only had one general corpse. At most there were 2 of them. There were thousands of general corpses in this city. He really didn't expect this. However, having more super-evolved general corpses was a good thing. In the eyes of others, there were more than 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. In his eyes, this was more than 100 billion kill points. As for the evolved general corpses, he had no intention of killing them. Since these general corpses could evolve so quickly, they might be able to evolve into super-evolved general corpses soon. At that time, it would be another large amount of killing points. At this moment, the general corpses below also discovered Mo's presence. They raised their heads and roared, making threatening noises towards Mo in the sky. Roar! Roar, roar, roar. Mo paid no attention to this. He slowly descended. When the general corpses saw Mo descend, they immediately became excited. They all gathered on the ground beneath Mo Shi. Very soon, the intersection was densely packed with evolved general corpses. If one looked down from the sky, they would discover that the wide intersection was completely occupied by black and gray. Mo Shi was more than 500 meters in the air and took out the dragon Salyer. Energy poured into the dragon Salyer from his arm. She lightly drew a cross at the intersection below her. In the next moment, the intersection suddenly collapsed. Boom! Boom! With 2 consecutive sounds, everything at the intersection turned into nothingness in an instant. Only 2 huge, long ravines were left. These 2 ravines were like huge cross-shaped scars on the ground. It was a ghastly sight. With these 2 slashes, Mo Shi had instantly killed more than 10,000 evolved general corpses, which was equivalent to instantly killing more than 10,000 hunters. What kind of terrifying strength was that? Perhaps this was the power of the dragon Salyer. However, no matter how strong the dragon Salyer was, it still needed to absorb energy. If it wasn't for Mo Shi's strength, before it could even be used, its energy would have been sucked dry by the blade. At this moment, Mo Shi continued to slowly descend from the sky. As for the general corpses outside the intersection that could not squeeze in before, although there was a huge space now, they did not dare to squeeze in at all. Their intelligence was even higher than that of normal humans. Seeing the terrifying strength of the human in the sky, they naturally could not continue to rush over to their deaths. On the contrary, when Mo Shi landed, more than 20 giant general corpses that were more than 500 meters tall surrounded Mo Shi from all directions. "Human, you've pissed us off." One of the corpse generals let out a sound that sounded like a tree branch being broken. Mo Shi sneered and looked around at the general corpses. Some were like Michelin spokesmen. Some were as thin as 4 chopsticks picking up a piece of tofu. There were also those that were neither fat nor thin, but were covered in muscles. Of course, there were also female general corpses. These giant general corpses that were more than 300 meters tall were all naked. Mo Shi felt nauseous when he saw this. Each of these super-evolved general corpses had strength comparable to a grand desolate master. They looked at the tiny human that was surrounded by them with anger and disdain in their eyes. Mo Shi swept his gaze around and slowly shook his head. "So what if I've pissed you off?" The female general corpse sneered. "If you piss us off, there's only one outcome: death." Mo Shi shook his head. "That depends on whether you have the ability." When the female general corpse heard this, she raised her right foot high. "I'll trample you to death, you ant." As she spoke, she stomped down on Mo Shi. Mo Shi shook his head again. These general corpses really did not grow up. They still played this game. The first time Mo Shi saw a general corpse play this game, it took him dozens of seconds to kill the general corpse. He wanted to see what tricks the general corpses had. Now that he knew the tricks of these general corpses, he naturally did not waste time. Just now, he seemed to be dragging the dragon Salyer in his hand, but in fact, he had been pouring energy into the dragon Salyer. At this moment, he watched as the general corpse's foot stepped down. He only waved the dragon Salyer gently in his right hand. It was as if nothing had happened. However, in the next moment, the upper and lower bodies of the 20 general corpses around him were all separated. All the super-evolved general corpses widened their eyes. They looked at their rapidly separated bodies in disbelief. Chapter 5:17. All the super-evolved general corpses were somewhat surprised. This was only the beginning, and it was already over. They hadn't even used their ultimate move. Not to mention their ultimate move, they hadn't even finished probing, and it was already over. How could this human be so strong? One had to know that in their understanding, humans were a group of insignificant creatures. Even the great desolate masters among humans seemed to have similar combat strength as them on the surface. But in reality, in front of their almost unkillable attribute, no matter how strong a human was, they would eventually be exhausted to death. But this human had cut them all into 2 with just 1 slash. Most importantly, their self-healing ability was completely useless in front of this human. In the past, even if their heads were twisted off, they wouldn't feel the aura of death at all. But today, after their bodies were cut in half, they could clearly feel that death was getting closer and closer to them. The footsteps of the Grim Reaper became louder and louder. In the end, all 20 super-evolved general corpses died. Their bodies had completely lost their vitality. And those super-evolved general corpses who were watching the show not far away all had a drastic change in expression. Other than that, there were no other living humans in this city. They all felt a little bored. It wasn't easy for a living human to appear, and they were like a group of cats encountering a mouse. They all wanted to play with this mouse. But they never thought that this mouse would be so strong. He killed 20 cats in one move. This wasn't F*King fun anymore. Thus, the corpse generals stealthily pulled their bodies back behind the buildings and hid. Of course, there were also some general corpses who didn't believe it. They still hadn't used their ultimate moves. And they still had an ultimate move that they hadn't used. How could they escape so easily? Therefore, these super-evolved general corpses were all holding back their ultimate moves. Whoever this human found, their ultimate move would be arranged for him. Mo had plundered the memories of a few super-evolved general corpses. Although he couldn't see the past from their memories. However, Mo was still able to see the short-term memories. From the memories of these super-evolved general corpses, Mo knew that they were holding back their ultimate move. He could easily resolve the ultimate move of a super-evolved general corpse with a dragon salure. However, there were over 1,000 super-evolved general corpses. Even if the dragon salure sucked all the energy in his body dry, it was still far from being able to exterminate all the thousands of corpses. Mo wouldn't be able to kill all of them in one strike unless they obediently sat in a row and ate fruits. Therefore, Mo put away the dragon slaughtering saber. After setting up a virtual sentry tower outside, he entered the dragon cave to cultivate Long Wei. Ever since he was able to control everything in the miniature world at will, he had already placed the dragon cave inside. Lying in the dragon cave, Mo completely relaxed his mind and began to rest. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the super-evolved corpse generals had already prepared their ultimate moves. They were just waiting for Mo to find them so that they could be released. However, after a full 10 minutes, there was no movement at all. Surprised, they all poked their heads out and looked at where the human was just now. But when they looked, they were surprised to find that the man was not in his original position. This caused them to panic a little. If that guy were to fight them head-on, they could use the ultimate move that they had long prepared to destroy that guy. However, if that guy were to launch a sneak attack from behind, it would be difficult for them to guard against it. While they were surprised, they all walked out from behind the buildings and looked around for Mo. However, Mo had hidden in his own miniature space. With their strength, it was impossible for them to discover him. Therefore, these guys held back their ultimate moves for more than half an hour. After more than half an hour, they were sure that the guy had left. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Mo was also tired. He slept for 12 hours. 12 hours later, he opened his eyes. With a thought from the dragon, he connected to the virtual sentry tower outside. After detecting those general corpses, they had already let down their guard. He checked the position of each of the commander corpses several times. In his mind, he roughly thought of a few routes. He wanted to kill a few more super-evolved general corpses with every slash. Then, he took out the dragon salure and poured 1/5 of the energy in his body into the dragon salure. With his current strength, he could swing the sword 5 times in a row. After 5 times, the energy in his body would be exhausted. After pouring in, Mo's mind moved, and he disappeared from the dragon cave. When he reappeared, he was already behind a building. On the other side of the building, a general corpse was sitting on the ground, concentrating on picking the soil between its nails. The moment Mo appeared, the dragon salure in his hand slashed at the general corpse across the entire building. Rumble, the building in front of him was suddenly cut open, creating a huge crack that was more than 50 meters wide. At the same time, on the other side of the building, the general corpse that was picking its feet was instantly cut in half. Even until its death, it did not know how it died. At the same time, a huge gully was cut open on the ground. This huge gully was more than 50 meters wide and 5 kilometers long. And within this 5 kilometers, there were 5 huge general corpses. Whoosh 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 whoosh. These 5 huge general corpses were also cut in half. This unforeseen event happened so suddenly that all the general corpses heard the commotion and looked over. They only saw the 5 huge general corpses fall to the ground one after another. Blood flowed like a stream and quickly gathered into a pool of blood on the ground. all the super-evolved general corpses reacted. "Oh no, that despicable human is still here." As they spoke, all the general corpses looked around. However, they could not see Mo Shi at all. At this moment, Mo Shi had already teleported to a dilapidated building. He hid in the dark and poured energy into the dragon's salure. At the same time, when the general corpses realized that Mo Shi had appeared again, they began to accumulate energy and prepare for their big moves. The general corpses' big moves were extremely powerful. They could destroy an entire city in one move. However, the disadvantage was that it took too long to accumulate energy. Mo Shi took advantage of the fact that they had not fully accumulated energy and slashed out 3 more times. He killed 7 general corpses. Then, he hid in the miniature world again. Those general corpses had already accumulated energy and were waiting for Mo Shi to appear. However, Mo Shi seemed to have evaporated into thin air and disappeared again. No matter how they turned the city upside down, they could not find that human. This made these super-evolved general corpses angry and panicked. Chapter 5:18. The super-evolved general corpses were terrified and furious when they could not find Mo Shi. 2 hours later, they finally let their guard down completely. However, Mo Shi appeared again at that moment. He swung his sword a few more times. This time, he chose a better spot. There were basically super-evolved general corpses around him. He killed over 30 super-evolved general corpses in one round. After 3 slashes, up to 100 super-evolved general corpses were killed. The super-evolved general corpses were shocked, panicked, and furious. To them, humans were an extremely weak race. They had always been the ones toying with humans. When had they ever been toyed with by a mere human? Among the super-evolved general corpses, there was a general corpse that was only over 200 meters tall. He looked smaller and thinner than the other general corpses, but he was actually the leader of these super-evolved general corpses. He had noticed that the humans seemed to be hunting them, the super-evolved general corpses. He immediately called one of the super-evolved general corpses next to him and roared at him a few times. The super-evolved general roared a few times in response. It then turned around and walked deep into the city. At the moment, Mo Shi was lying on a soft bed floating above the lake in Micro-World. He was enjoying the sun. Naturally, he had already detected that the super-evolved general was walking deep into the city through the virtual guard tower. He immediately followed the super-evolved general corpses with dragon telekinesis. A moment later, the super-evolved general corpses entered a crater with a diameter of over 500 meters deep in the city. Craters like this were very common in various cities. These were basically craters created by all sorts of corpse-destroying bombs that exploded underground when general corpses attacked the city. General corpses were creatures that could burrow under the surface. The corpse-destroying bombs could burrow underground for hundreds or even thousands of meters, causing devastating damage to the general corpses' nests. Therefore, Mo Shi had not carefully investigated these craters before. As the general corpses entered the crater, Mo Shi's dragon telekinesis followed. He saw that the crater was very deep and led underground. When he looked down carefully, he was shocked to find that the crater's depth was so deep. His dragon telekinesis had been following the super-evolved general corpses until they were 10 kilometers underground. At the moment, his dragon telekinesis could not reach down. What's so strange about this huge pit? Mo Shi muttered to himself. However, no matter how strange it was, he had to do it first. With that thought in mind, Mo Shi left Miniature World and returned to the city to hunt down the super-evolved general corpses. When the super-evolved zombies reacted and were about to unleash their ultimate skills, he once again hid in his Miniature World. The cycle was so repeated that the super-evolved general corpses were about to explode. Imagine facing such an opponent who would sneak up on you from time to time. By the time you react, you'll be hiding in your turtle shell again. Even if you have all the strength in your body, there's nowhere for you to use it. As long as it was a normal person, their mentality would explode. Not to mention these super-evolved general corpses. However, an hour later, when Mo Shi had just killed over 100 corpse generals, a roar suddenly came from the huge pit. Eh-oh-oh, gaga-gaga, roar. This roar was completely different from the roars of other super-evolved general corpses. It was very recognizable. Furthermore, as long as one listened to it once, it would be impossible to forget it again. Mo Shi was slightly shocked when he heard it. His dragon mind moved and immediately probed into the pit. With that, Mo Shi was instantly stunned. He saw a large number of super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the huge pit. 1, 2, 5, 100, 200, 500. And it wasn't just that pit. In the entire city, there were super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the hundreds of huge pits. The super-evolved general corpses in the city saw more and more super-evolved general corpses swarming out from all directions. They were all very excited. They kept baring their teeth and opening their mouths, letting out excited roars. Ayo! Roar! Roar! Ayo! The super-evolved general corpses that had just crawled out of the huge pit didn't dare to roar in response to the super-evolved general corpses. Mo Shi was shocked. He quickly teleported and arrived at an altitude of 10,000 meters. He looked down from the sky. From this angle, the super-evolved general corpses crawling out of the huge pit looked like the huge pit was constantly spitting out these super-evolved general corpses. The vomiting didn't stop until half an hour later. At this moment, looking down from the ground, he saw that the ground was densely packed with super-evolved general corpses that were 300 meters tall. They were squeezing together, which reminded Mo Shi of an idiom he had learned in elementary school. Shoulder to shoulder. All the super-evolved general corpses raised their heads and roared at Mo Shi. Mo Shi made a rough estimate. There were at least 8,000 super-evolved general corpses here, if not 10,000. This was equivalent to 10,000 Grand Desolate Masters. One had to know that there were at most 30 to 50 Grand Desolate Masters on the Flaming Land. Now, there were thousands or even tens of thousands. If another human saw this, they would only be able to flee in defeat. However, Mo Shi's eyes were sparkling at this moment. These were all kill points. At this moment, he didn't hesitate and took out a fist-sized orb. Demon-suppressing orb. Using a demon-suppressing orb for kill points was worth it. On the ground, the super-evolved general corpses couldn't attack Mo Shi, who was 10,000 meters in the air. They all cried out hungrily. At the same time, their backs started to crack. 2 bones extended out from inside. These 2 bones quickly separated and formed bone wings. Flesh membrane gradually grew on the bone wings. Only then did Mo Shi understand that these fellows could actually fly. He couldn't wait any longer. Otherwise, should he wait for these guys to fly up and take care of him? He let go of his right hand. The demon-suppressing orb fell rapidly. Soon, hundreds of super-evolved general corpses flew 100 meters into the air. However, at this moment the demon-suppressing orb fell. These super-evolved general corpses were instantly frozen in the air. All the super-evolved general corpses in the air seemed to have been immobilized. Only the demon-suppressing orb was falling rapidly. Soon, the demon-suppressing orb landed. In the next moment, there was a dazzling light. This dazzling light covered the entire city. Even Mo Shi, who was in the sky, couldn't open his eyes. However, the strange thing was that such a dazzling light didn't make any sound. After a full 5 minutes, the light gradually faded. Mo Shi rubbed his eyes. After his eyes adjusted to the normal brightness, he looked at the ground again. He saw that the ground was still the same ground. The city was still the same city. However, the tens of thousands of super-evolved general corpses on the city's ground had long disappeared. Not even a trace of flesh was left. It was as if they had never appeared in this city. The demon-suppressing orb's power was terrifying. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.